Chapter 678. Hearing that, Ferdinand couldn't sit still anymore. He stood up and shouted, "You Qianqiu, what are you trying to do?" The imperial power of the Wuxia Empire was the exclusive property of Fuxian Island, and the benefits were self-evident. Any disciple of Fuxian Island could do anything within the borders of the Wuxia Empire with just a word. Anything that happened in the secular world could be settled with just a word. At the same time, the imperial power of the Li clan acted as the eyes of Fuxian Island in the secular world. Many corners that even cultivators couldn't reach, Fuxian Island had ways to keep an eye on them. This was the benefit of holding the imperial power hostage. Most importantly, the people of China could let Fuxian Island pick the best disciple, and they had the first pick condition compared to other sections. Don't underestimate this benefit. This was the foundation that maintained the prosperity of Fuxian Island. As long as there were successors, there was no need to worry about there being no new talents rising. Now that Yu Qianqiu actually said that he wanted to overthrow the imperial power of China, how could Ferdinand not know the consequences of this, as he was also a high-level figure of Fuxian Island? "Ah, why are you making such a fuss?" Yu Qianqiu smiled disapprovingly. "It's a matter of course for the emperor to take turns. It doesn't make sense for anyone to be the emperor forever. Don't be anxious. It's useless even if you are anxious. You can't make the decision anyway. Just pass the message to Ma Jianghu. Let the people who should worry about it worry." Ferdinand said angrily, "You are taking advantage of the precarious situation of the sects to threaten Fuxian Island." "I definitely don't mean to threaten." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and drank the wine in front of him. He played with the wine cup and said indifferently, "Didn't you say that cultivators can't intervene in the secular world's affairs? If the secular people want to fight for the world, let them fight. Who wins and who loses depends on their own ability. We shouldn't intervene. But then again, if someone interferes, don't blame me for being impolite." Ferdinand stared at him with flickering eyes. Suddenly he sneered and said, "Yu Qianqiu, I really didn't expect you to have such a big ambition. You actually set your sights on the whole world. I just don't understand. Isn't it better for you to join supporting Immortal Island? If I become the sect master of supporting Immortal Island one day, wouldn't it be easier for me to take over the entire world?" "One day?" Yu Qianqiu sneered. "If I say that my ambition is not for the whole world, but for the people of the world, will you believe me?" "Full of loopholes," Ferdinand said sarcastically. "Once the war comes, how many people will lose their families and break up their families? Is this what you mean by caring for the common people?" "Yes, you're right. But I don't think this is a reason for the cultivation world to interfere with the secular world." Yu Qianqiu stood up, looked out of the window and said slowly, "A short pain is better than a long one. It's difficult to change the world without killing people." He turned around and said to Ferdinand, "Who can guarantee that they will always be in power? If the descendants of Furong and I are reduced to the level of ordinary people one day, they will live under layers of oppression and want to resist, but because of the cultivation world's intervention, they will never be able to stand up, and their descendants will be oppressed forever without a chance to resist. Do you still think it's right for the cultivation world to control the power of the secular world for their own interests?" Ferdinand's expression changed slightly. The situation Yu Qianqiu said was not impossible but very likely. After all, not everyone's descendants had the aptitude for cultivation. Take supporting Immortal Island for example, there were also descendants of elders who were reduced to ordinary people. When the elders were alive they could take care of them, but once they died for many years, who would care about them? Yu Qianqiu continued with a smile, "The matters of our descendants are too far away, and we can't make arrangements for our descendants in the future. Whether they are poor or rich, noble or humble, they need to rely on their own efforts to get rid of and fight for it. But the strong intervention of the cultivation world has made many ordinary people have no chance to change their fate. The emperor's family is at the bottom, and the country is made of iron, so he can do whatever he wants to the ordinary people. To the common people, the cultivation world was an unreasonable existence. So I think that the cultivation world is the cultivation world, and the secular world is the secular world, and the two are absolutely not allowed to mix together." Ferdinand was silent, and the room became quiet. Yu Qianqiu looked at him with a smile. After a long time, Ferdinand asked in a deep voice, "What you just said is your real opinion?" Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, "I admit that I'm not such a noble person, so it's still too early to make a conclusion about whether it's true or false. You might as well wait and see it with your own eyes." Ferdinand stared at the grinning Yu Qianqiu with a burning gaze for a while before he suddenly sighed and said, "My ability is limited, so I can't change anything. But remember to treat Furong well or else I'll curse you forever." After saying that, he removed the soundproof enchantment laid by Yu Qianqiu and strode away. Yu Qianqiu followed him with a grin and said, "I'll send you off." Ferdinand suddenly turned around and said in a deep voice, "The wine just now was really bad. It's bitter. Do you have any more? Let me take some back to drink." Yu Qianqiu stared blankly for a moment before he nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes, yes, yes." Then he took out more than a dozen jars in a row. Ferdinand also didn't stand on ceremony. He took all of them and left resolutely. Yu Qianqiu followed behind him eagerly. The group of people downstairs had yet to disperse. When they saw the two of them going downstairs, they saw Yu Qianqiu send the gloomy Ferdinand directly to the garden of the quiet guest house. Looking at Ferdinand leaving, Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly. He knew that the old guy would definitely bear a lot of pressure when he went back. At least, he couldn't avoid some people's accusations. However, some things were like this. If one wanted to succeed, there would always be many people who would sacrifice for it. After returning to the courtyard, he glanced at the crowd and walked directly into the building as if he didn't see anything. When he passed by Qiu Weiyuan finally couldn't help but shout, "Brother Yu, please wait." Yu Qianqiu stopped and looked at him with a smile. "Brother Qiu, what's the matter? Let's talk about it upstairs." He was straightforward, but Qiu Weiyuan didn't expect it to be so simple. He was more or less surprised. When the others saw this, they immediately followed suit and rushed forward, shouting, "Yu Qianqiu, I also have something to talk to you about. I'm here on the order of the sect. Yu Qianqiu, I won't disturb you for too long." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the crowd coldly and accidentally found a woman at the back of the crowd who didn't squeeze in. Perhaps because she was a woman, it was inconvenient for her to rub and push with a group of men. She was looking at them anxiously. However, Yu Qianqiu knew this woman. She was Hua Rui of the Moon Clan. "Elder Hua of the Moon Clan, stay. The rest of you can leave. We can talk later," Yu Qianqiu said to the crowd. Hua Rui looked at Yu Qianqiu and nodded happily. After being stunned for a moment, the crowd immediately became restless. They all shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, this is good for you? Yu Qianqiu, let me finish. If you don't scram, I don't mind killing a few of you," Yu Qianqiu shouted with a fierce look. When he said this, the garden immediately quieted down. Everyone looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu was known as the butcher of the cultivation world. It was said that he killed people like flies and never showed mercy. He even killed a few cultivators at the final stage of the tribulation stage. "Do you really think I don't dare to do it?" Yu Qianqiu threatened again. At this point, no one dared to stay to verify the truth of his words. They all left the garden hesitantly. Yu Qianqiu stared at the figures leaving through the gate and snorted. Sometimes, using force was better than talking reason. Then he nodded at Hua Rui and Qiu Weiyuan, gesturing for them to follow him. The two hurriedly followed him upstairs. The garden finally returned to the peace it deserved. In the room where he talked to Ferdinand, Yu Qianqiu set up a soundproof wizardry barrier again. Qiu Weiyuan and Hua Rui looked at each other in surprise. They both confirmed that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation had indeed broken through to the tribulation stage. The rumor was indeed true. "I know why you are here." Yu Qianqiu was honest. He looked at Qiu Weiyuan and said with a smile, "I can understand the Moon Clan, but the 10,000 demons don't have to be too anxious. Yan Bugui is the son of the previous leader of the 10,000 demons after all. I think he won't make things difficult for the 10,000 demons. And that Yan Zhuixing, he is very powerful now. He is the disciple of Bing Qingzi, a semi-god realm cultivator. No one in the world dares to disrespect Bing Qingzi. Whoever wants to touch the 10,000 demons will have to think twice." Qiu Weiyuan smiled bitterly. "Yu Qianqiu, I know you have a grudge against senior brother and Yan Bugui. But this is a different matter. The 10,000 demons have nothing to do with them. Besides, you should also know that even if they want to protect the 10,000 demons, they won't be able to. Yan Zhuixing can't even take care of himself. All the countries are sending people to capture him. And my senior brother? Sigh. Not long ago, I just got the news that the Wuxia island has been occupied. My senior brother escaped the Wuxia island under the protection of the Ice Palace disciples. His whereabouts are still unknown. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know the news of the Wuxia island, Yan Bugui's ending was within his expectations. Since all the countries were trying to capture Yan Zhuixing, how could the Wuxia island let his father, Yan Bugui, make the decision? Even if the Ice Palace wanted to protect him, the Blue Palace and the other major forces wouldn't give them face. It was already a great fortune that Yan Bugui was able to escape. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two and smiled. "Everyone knows what's going on. There are some things that I'm too embarrassed to say. Let me put it this way. Previously, the supporting Immortal Island promised me that as long as I returned to the island, they would let me be the chief elder of the supporting Immortal Island. But I rejected it. Could it be that the two of you have more favorable conditions than the supporting Immortal Island? The two were slightly shocked. They didn't expect the supporting Immortal Island to be so generous. The chief elder of the supporting Immortal Island was usually the next sect master of the island. Yu Qianqiu even rejected this condition. When the two thought about the conditions they brought, they couldn't bring themselves to say it. Although the room was quiet, the atmosphere was a little restless. After waiting for a while, Yu Qianqiu smiled. Actually, there are always things in this world that can move people. It just depends on whether it's to your liking. For example, I have some unresolved grudges with the Deluo sect. If someone can help me eradicate the Deluo sect, I think I will definitely repay the kindness. Chapter 679. What? Qiu Weiyuan and Hua Rui couldn't help but exclaim. Yu Qianqiu nodded with a smile, but a fierce look flashed in his eyes. Actually, with his current strength he could go to Deluo sect alone, but it would be difficult to completely wipe them out. Even if he used all his strength, Deluo sect's deep roots wouldn't be easy to deal with. Moreover, who knew how many tribulation-passing experts were hidden among them? Even if they couldn't beat him, they could at least escape, right? If he wanted to wipe out Deluo sect, he couldn't let those experts escape. Otherwise they could rise again at any time. Such a large-scale operation required an equally large faction to take action. One was the number 1 sect in the demonic path, while the other was number 3 in the righteous path. If the two joined forces, Deluo sect would definitely lose. Actually, Yu Qianqiu had thought of asking supporting Immortal Island for help, but they definitely wouldn't be willing. Supporting Immortal Island would rather give up their worldly power than make a move on Deluo sect. Otherwise, not only would it damage the righteous path's strength, but supporting Immortal Island would also lose the right to continue leading the righteous path. Yu Qianqiu, what kind of hatred do you have with Deluo sect that you would want to wipe them out? Hua Rui asked with a frown. Yu Qianqiu's smile turned cold and he said in a deep voice, "When I first joined On Guangceng, my master died at the hands of Deluo sect. Back then, I swore on my master's corpse that I would avenge him. Is that reason enough?" There was another reason he didn't say, and that was that Shi Wenguang was about to send out his troops. He chose this time to cause trouble for Deluo sect to cause chaos in China's cultivation world. This was to prevent people from getting too comfortable and increasing the pressure on Shi Wenguang. As long as the cultivation world was stabilized, he had no doubts about Shi Wenguang's ability to fight a war. Only when Shi Wenguang controlled the entire Wuxia Empire would he have more resources for him to prepare for war. Otherwise, the western border wouldn't be able to arm an army to conquer the world. Another thing was that now was the best time to fish in troubled waters. Once Bai Changchun went to the East Holy Land, he would be able to take advantage of the situation. When the various countries' forces arrived, no one could say what the situation would be like. Therefore, now was the perfect time to target the exalted sect. Hua Rui was speechless. Since Yu Qianqiu had sworn an oath, it seemed like he was determined to take action against the Daluo sect. Qiu Weiyuan's gaze flickered. If it was during normal times when there were no external enemies, this wouldn't be a bad thing for the 10,000 demons. If they could eradicate the forces of the righteous path, the 10,000 demons would be more than willing to do so. But now, it was time for them to deal with a foreign enemy together, so it was a little difficult. I'm afraid we'll be scorned by the entire cultivation world if we make a move against the exalted sect now. Qiu Weiyuan looked at Yu Qianqiu and snickered. I'm afraid Fuxian Island and their righteous comrades will not just sit back and do nothing, right? It seemed like this guy was more or less tempted. Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, "Since when did the 10,000 demons become so timid? If you're really willing to help me, the other problems are not a problem. I'll step forward and settle it. I'd like to see who wants to go against me. If you're not willing to help me, that's fine too. There will naturally be others who will be more than happy to help. I don't believe that without Butcher Zhang, we'll have to eat pigs with hair on them." Qiu Weiyuan looked at Hua Rui and said hesitantly, "This matter is too big. I'm afraid it's not something the two of us can make the decision." Hua Rui nodded silently. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "I'm not counting on the two of you to make the decision. I'll give you 1 day. I'll wait for your reply in 1 day. If you're late, I won't wait." With that said, he lifted his hand and removed the soundproof barrier, sending the guests off. The two of them did not stay and hurriedly left. This matter had to be reported to the sect as soon as possible. Yu Qianqiu walked to the window and watched the two of them leave the garden. After that, he fell into deep thought. Then he closed the window and disappeared from the room. the capital of the Wuxia Empire was bustling and lively as usual. On both sides of a quiet street were rows upon rows of luxurious mansions. It showed that the people who could live on this street were all influential people in the capital. However, this grand and tall mansion seemed a little down and out. In this luxurious mansion were nobles and nobles gathered. The tall walls were in need of new paint, the tiles were old and in need of renovation. The red paint on the tall vermilion door was peeling. It looked a little shabby and bleak. Who could imagine that the owner of this mansion was the mansion of the pillar of the state general who had his own army at the western border? Similarly, because the pillar of the state general had his own army, the Sher family did not dare to be too high profile. They allowed the mansion to be worn down and did not whitewash it on the outside. He was afraid that if the color was too bright, it would agitate the emperor, who was already full of suspicions, even more. The neighbors who lived in the surrounding mansions were all officials of the court and were used to the Sher family's low profile. They would at most glance when they passed by, not daring to have any entanglements with the pillar of the state general. Once upon a time, this was a rich and powerful family that many people wanted to curry favor with, but did not have the means to do so. But now, everyone was trying to avoid them, afraid that they would be implicated if they had even the slightest connection with the pillar of the state general. This was because there were countless spies from the court watching this place. If they were not careful, they could become the accomplices of the pillar of the state general. In front of the door, the once bustling traffic had disappeared for many years. Now all that was left was deserted. Even describing this place as deserted was a little too much. The gatekeeper behind the vermilion door was lying down in the gatehouse and dozing off. There was no need to worry about anyone disturbing him. At this moment, the sound of galloping horses could be heard from outside the door. There was also the sound of a large group of people running. Even the dozing gatekeeper could feel the ground tremble. The gatekeeper suddenly woke up. He was very familiar with this sound. It was the sound that would come from outside when the pillar of the state general or the pillar of the state general returned. Was it the pillar of the state general or the pillar of the state general? The gatekeeper's face lit up. He quickly adjusted his clothes and hat and opened the door impatiently. The first thing he saw was the gleaming swords and spears. The general on horseback had an unfamiliar face. He was neither the pillar of the state general nor the pillar of the state general. He was waving his whip viciously at the two ends of the street and shouted, "Surround this place. Everyone keep your eyes open. Do not let a single fly out of the general's residence. Anyone who disobeys will be executed." The large group of people split into two sides and surrounded the pillar of the state general's residence like an iron bucket. The gatekeeper's expression changed greatly. He had also heard rumors that the pillar of the state general was going to rebel. Could it be that the pillar of the state general was really going to rebel? The general on the horse glared fiercely at the open door. The gatekeeper was so scared that he slammed the door shut with a bang. He didn't forget to bolt the door shut. He turned around and ran back into the courtyard. As he ran, he shouted, "Not good. Something bad is going to happen. Not good." The general's residence is surrounded by a large group of people. The shouts reverberated throughout the general's residence. The family members and servants who had been living in fear every day suddenly rushed out of nowhere. Their faces were pale. The courtyard suddenly seemed to be overcrowded. The mistress, Li Hongyang, walked out from the main hall with her two wives, Bao Wanshi and Si Tuhui. Bao Wanshi was even holding the hand of a curious child. "Madam, not good. The general's residence is surrounded by soldiers." The gatekeeper shouted as he ran towards the main hall. Hearing this, the three women who were already panicking became even more at a loss. Bao Wanshi squatted down immediately. She hugged her son and cried, "I didn't expect this day to come. My poor son." So, a cold light suddenly flashed out of nowhere. The head of the gatekeeper who had been shouting loudly was directly separated from his body. Without any warning, it flew into the air and fell into the bushes at the side. Blood spurted out. The headless body fell on the road with a bang. The road was instantly stained with blood. Ah! Screams came from all around. Si Tuhui tilted her head to support the tottering Li Hongyang. Bao Wanshi was so scared that she buried her head in her son's chest. The cold light that killed the person returned with a whoosh. A person walked out of the back garden and put away his flying sword. It was none other than Shi Xiaotian. He walked to the front of the main hall expressionlessly. He looked around at the crowd and said in a deep voice, "Anyone who dares to disturb people's morale will be killed without mercy." A group of servants looked at the third young master in disbelief. They were so scared that they were trembling. They didn't expect that the seemingly docile third young master would actually kill someone in the blink of an eye. Looking at his expressionless face, it made people feel disgusted. Li Hongyang and the other two women also looked at Shi Xiaotian as if they didn't know him anymore. Li Hongyang said with a trembling voice, "Third brother, did you kill that person just now?" She still couldn't believe it. Shi Xiaotian clapped his hands with his back facing the three women without even turning his head. 10 masked men in black appeared out of nowhere and stood in a row in front of him. "Guard every direction. Anyone who dares to enter or leave without permission, kill without mercy," Shi Xiaotian ordered expressionlessly. The 10 men bowed and said, "Yes." Then they disappeared in front of everyone like ghosts. "Housekeeper," Shi Xiaotian called. Shi Shunqing quickly ran over and bowed, "Third young master." He didn't panic at the scene just now because he had followed the great general to the battlefield. This kind of scene was really nothing to him. Shi Xiaotian pointed at the decapitated corpse on the road and said, "Clean it up. Also, pass down the order that if anyone dares to disturb people's morale again, they will be punished by the family law until they die." "Yes." Shi Shunqing immediately retreated, but his eyes revealed a bit of admiration. He thought to himself, as expected of the great general's son, he didn't panic in the face of danger. Shi Xiaotian looked at the direction of the gate. In fact, with his current cultivation of the early stage of tribulation passing, he had already noticed a large group of people when they arrived. This was the first time he killed someone. Even now, his heart was still beating wildly. However, he had no choice. He was the only pillar of support in the family. If he lost his sense of propriety, then the whole family would be in chaos. Therefore, when it was necessary, he made a move to intimidate the family and let them see his methods. Naturally, they would feel at ease. The corpses on the road had already been carried away by 2 courageous servants. The bloodstains on the road had also been washed with buckets of water. The servants obediently returned to their positions and did what they were supposed to do. Although they were afraid, no one dared to show it. In the blink of an eye, peace returned to the residence. "Third uncle." The child ran over and hugged Shi Xiaotian's leg. He raised his head and asked with sparkling eyes, "Did third uncle kill those people just now?" Shi Xiaotian patted his head. This nephew was much more courageous than his eldest brother and his wife. He turned around and bowed to the 3 people on the steps of the main hall. He said, "I'm sorry for frightening mother and sisters-in-law." The 3 women recovered from their panic and looked at the calm Shi Xiaotian. They immediately felt at ease. There was still a man in the family, so they didn't have to worry about anything. However, the scene of the head suddenly flying just now still made the 3 women's hearts palpitate. They looked at Shi Xiaotian in disbelief. Did he really kill that person just now? The 3 women looked at each other. They more or less knew that Shi Xiaotian wasn't an ordinary person. He cultivated in the back garden for a long time, but they didn't expect him to be such a person. "Third brother, what's going on with the people surrounding the general's residence? Did something really happen to your father?" Li Hongyang asked worriedly. Shi Xiaotian smiled faintly and said, "Mother, don't worry. It should be fine. If something really happened to my father, the people outside wouldn't have surrounded him. I'm afraid they would have already rushed inside." Li Hongyang sighed and said, "Your father and brothers are not here. You are the only man in the family who can make decisions. There are some things that we women don't understand. The whole family is counting on you." Shi Xiaotian bowed slightly and said, "Mother and sisters-in-law, don't worry. I'm here and nothing will happen." He said to Situ Hui, who was supporting Li Hongyang, and said with a smile, "Second sister-in-law, help mother to go inside and rest. I'm here, don't worry." Situ Hui nodded. Bao Wanshi, whose tears had not dried yet, also pulled her son. Because Shi Xiaotian's thunderous means just now, the panicked atmosphere in the family immediately calmed down. The 3 women were very confident in Shi Xiaotian now, so they went back with peace of mind. As for the death, it was normal for a big family to occasionally execute a disobedient servant, so it wouldn't make them feel uncomfortable. On the street outside the general's mansion, there were officials who came back from work. When they saw the general's mansion being surrounded, they all shook their heads and sneered. Shi Yutian, who also came back from work, was stopped outside the gate by the soldiers. Shi Yutian, who had a bad expression, got out of the sedan chair. When he saw the soldiers at the gate of the mansion, he immediately panicked and said, "What do you mean by blocking the general's mansion?" The general turned his horse around and looked at Shi Yutian condescendingly. He sneered with a trace of arrogance and said, "It turns out that the young master of the general's mansion is back. Recently there have been bandits in the capital. For the safety of the general's mansion, I was ordered to protect the general's mansion. Don't come out again after you go home. Otherwise, I won't be responsible if something happens." Then he waved his whip and said, "Get out of the way, let Lord Sher in." Nonsense, how could there be bandits in the capital? Before Sher Yutian could finish his words, he heard the general shout, "Sir Sher, there are some things that everyone knows. Do you really want this general to tear down all pretenses of cordiality? This general is ordered to only allow people to enter the general's mansion. No one is allowed to leave." Sher Yutian was immediately at a loss for words. He waved his hand weakly and the servants immediately went to knock on the door. The group of people entered with their tails between their legs. Behind them, the general sneered as if he was sharpening his blade. When they were about to reach the main hall, Sher Yutian suddenly noticed a few servants washing the floor. He accidentally wet his shoes and immediately flew into a rage. "Where are your eyes?" This scared the servants so much that they trembled in fear. "Big brother." A cold, warning voice rang out. Sher Yutian was stunned when he saw Sher Xiaotian standing on the steps of the main hall and staring at him. This third brother of his rarely left the backyard. Why was he standing here today? Did he know something? In all fairness, Sher Yutian was still very afraid of Sher Xiaotian. There was no other reason than that Sher Xiaotian was an immortal-like figure in his eyes. Even though they were blood brothers, he would always show a fawning expression, hoping to get 1 or 2 spirit pills or miraculous medicines. When Sher Xiaotian was in a good mood, he would also give him 1 or 2 qi recovery pills. After eating them, Sher Youqian's spirits were lifted and he became even more fawning. "Third brother, why did you come out?" Sher Yutian revealed a face full of smiles and immediately forgot about his previous unhappiness. He hurried over and stood at the bottom of the steps, looking up happily. It was as if he was the little brother and Sher Xiaotian was the big brother. Sher Xiaotian frowned and raised his chin towards the outside. "What's going on with the troops outside?" Sher Youqian's face darkened and he said sadly, "I don't know if it's true or not. I heard rumors that the imperial court received a report from the west saying that father and second brother are mobilizing troops and collecting rations from all over the place. They're plotting something. And the imperial court is already mobilizing troops in preparation. I thought it was just a rumor, but looking at the situation outside, I'm afraid it's true. Third brother, you have to think of something. The imperial court clearly wants to put us under house arrest as hostages. Once father really mobilizes his troops, our family will become ghosts under the knife." Sher Xiaoyan's eyes lit up. He turned a deaf ear to the latter part of his brother's words and muttered to himself excitedly, "Looks like boss is ready to make his move. We can finally leave this place and explore the cultivation world." "Yo, both of you brothers are here? As expected of blood brothers, you're so close." A sinister laughter rang out. The two brothers suddenly turned around and saw a person slowly walking out from the back garden's entrance with his hands behind his back. Who else could it be but Yu Qianqiu? Sher Yutian felt his vision blur and his third brother had already disappeared and appeared at the back garden's entrance. He was extremely envious of his brother's supernatural power. He hurriedly ran over and bowed, saying, "Sher Yutian pays his respects to Mr. Yu." Yu Qianqiu smiled and raised his hand, indicating that he didn't have to be so polite. At the side, Sher Xiaotian rubbed his hands excitedly and said, "Boss, you're finally here. Does that mean our family can leave this place?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He asked in surprise, "How did you know?" "The soldiers outside are a signal." Sher Xiaotian immediately told him what he could think of. Chapter 680. After listening to him, Yu Qianqiu's expression froze. It seemed that Shi Wenguang had made a big move, and he couldn't hide it anymore. Fortunately, he had already arranged people to protect them, and Shi Xiaoyan's current cultivation was not weak. Otherwise, he might have harmed this family due to his lack of consideration. When he told Ferdinand that Shi Wenguang was going to send troops, he was afraid that the people from Fuxian Island would not be calm and would attack the Shi family. That was why he came to take a look in advance. He didn't expect the imperial court to know and make preparations in advance. It seemed that he had to send this family away before the 1-month deadline was up. With this layer of concern, Yu Qianqiu decided not to delay any longer. He immediately muttered to himself, "Little Tian, order people to send all the valuable things in your clan to the rear garden. Then gather everyone in the clan in the rear garden. I'll wait for you in the rear garden." Shi Xiaoyan's eyes lit up. "Are we leaving?" Yu Qianqiu nodded. Shi Yutian asked in confusion, "Where are we going?" The excited Shi Xiaotian was afraid that he would ruin things, so he immediately catered to him. It's not safe here anymore. We're going to the place where the deities live. Mr. Yu wants to bring our whole family along, so you mustn't leak this information. Really? Shi Yutian was in disbelief. Of course. You've heard what Mr. Yu said. Go and prepare with me. Shi Shaotian seemed a little unhappy. Shi Yutian was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He immediately promised, "Don't worry, third brother. I won't tell anyone, not even your sister-in-law. I'll give her a surprise." He ran away happily. Yu Qianqiu was speechless at the Shi family's eldest brother who was always dreaming about deities. He shook his head and returned to the backyard. He went to the small courtyard to inform Lingfeng, Beizi, and Xianping to prepare to leave. The Shi family was indeed a big family with a lot of valuable things. Not to mention the big and small bags including the boxes filled with things, it was really like a mountain. In the back garden, there were more than 100 servants of the Shi family alone. In less than half a day they had prepared all the people and belongings. With such high efficiency, it could be seen that the two brothers had done a good job in mobilizing the people. Li Hongyang and her daughter-in-law, who were gathered together, walked to Yu Qianqiu and bowed. Li Hongyang bowed slightly and said, "Mr. is still the same. You haven't changed at all. It's really enviable." As he spoke, he pointed at the people and belongings behind him and asked worriedly, "I just don't know why Sir gave such an order." Before she could finish her words, Shi Yutian ran over and held her back. He said anxiously, "Mother, Sir has his reasons for doing this. When the time comes, you will naturally know what is going on." He was afraid that his mother would make Yu Qianqiu unhappy and take him to the place where the immortals lived. To him, high positions, generous salaries, and descendants of rich and powerful families were all illusory. Only immortals were extraordinary and worth pursuing. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "Don't worry, madam. Shi Yutian is right. When we arrive at the place, I'm afraid madam won't want to come back. You will have to thank me." Shi Youqian's eyes lit up when he heard this. Li Hongyang was still a little worried about her unreliable eldest son. She looked at Shi Shaotian and saw him smiling and nodding his head. Only then did she feel relieved. She smiled awkwardly at Yu Qianqiu and said, "I was reckless. Please don't take it to heart, sir." Yu Qianqiu wasn't going to argue with her. With his hands clasped behind his back, he signaled the 10 black-clothed masked men with his eyes. The 10 men quickly spread out and searched the entire general's residence. After making sure that no one had missed anything, they quickly returned and signaled to Yu Qianqiu that there was no problem. The 10 men then spread out and surrounded the people and belongings in the backyard. Yu Qianqiu put down his hands behind his back and slowly opened his arms. A large amount of majestic mist gushed out from his body and slowly covered the entire backyard. This magical scene stunned everyone, especially Shi Yutian. He looked excited and thought to himself, "This is indeed the legendary deity who can breathe clouds and spit out mist." The mist that shrouded the backyard became thicker and thicker. In the end, it reached the point where they could not see the person in front of them clearly. Everyone felt that it was both magical and mysterious. However, they did not know that the backyard of the general's residence had been emptied out in an instant. In the military camp at the western border, a large piece of empty space had been surrounded by cloth. This was done within an hour after Shi Wenguang received the order from Yu Qianqiu. No one was allowed to come within 100 meters of the outside of the cloth wall. Only Shi Wenguang and his son were pacing back and forth anxiously. At this moment, the entrance of the cloth wall was lifted and Yu Qianqiu walked out with a smile. The father and son strode over and bowed. Shi Wenguang could not help but ask, "Sir, inside?" Yu Qianqiu pulled up the curtain and saw a thick fog inside. He could not see anything clearly. As the father and son looked at each other, they saw Yu Qianqiu extend his hand inside. His sleeve sucked in the thick fog like a whale drawing water. The crowd and the mountainous pile of things gradually appeared behind the cloth wall, leaving the father and son dumbfounded. Holy **T. They almost moved the entire general's residence over. When the people inside saw their surroundings, they could not figure out what was going on. When they saw Shi Wenguang and his son, they immediately burst into an uproar. Yu Qianqiu walked away with a smile, not disturbing the family reunion. The reason why he had released the thick fog to cover it up was because he had to pass by Utopia as a transit point. He did not want unrelated people to know the secret of Utopia, so he used the thick fog to deliberately mystify them. As for the 10 Special Forces members who were protecting the Shi residence, they had already returned when they passed by Utopia. "Boss." A call came from behind. Yu Qianqiu turned around and saw that it was Ling Feng and the other two. It seemed like they did not want to disturb Shi Wenguang's family reunion. The three of them sized up the scenery around them. When they looked at Yu Qianzhou again, they were filled with deep respect. They couldn't help but admire him. In the blink of an eye, he had come to Shi Wenguang's western military camp from the distant capital. Furthermore, he had brought so many people and things at once. This divine ability was unheard of. The three of them followed him to Shi Wenguang's tent. As they walked, Ling Feng asked respectfully, "Boss, what should the three of us do in the future?" When the soldiers guarding the tent saw that it was Yu Qianzhou, they did not stop him and let him in. After entering the tent, Yu Qianzhou said with a smile, "General Shi is about to mobilize his troops. I'm afraid that someone will harm them. The three of you will continue to follow Shi Xiaotian and be in charge of protecting his family. Go." The three of them were somewhat reluctant. How could it be better to follow someone as powerful as Yu Qianzhou? However, they did not dare to disobey. They acknowledged and left. The tent was empty. Yu Qianzhou walked to the commander's seat in the center and sat down to take a nap. In his mind, he was thinking about how to deal with the Daluo sect. After an unknown period of time, he suddenly heard footsteps outside. His eyes slowly opened. Shi Wenguang happily walked in with his grandson in his arms and the rest of the family. The family looked very happy. They looked at Yu Qianzhou with respectful expressions. This was the first time they had experienced such a magical scene. They had been in the capital before, but they had arrived here in the blink of an eye. It was simply too magical. In their eyes, Yu Qianzhou had become a living god. However, there seemed to be someone who was not very happy, and that person was Shi Yutian. His expression was somewhat stiff. He had naively believed that he would be able to go to the place where the gods lived. He had been full of excitement when he was in the clouds, but who knew that he would end up here? He was dumbfounded. He was happy that his family was reunited, but he was even more disappointed. Shi Wenguang put down his grandson and flung off his cloak. He knelt on one knee and cupped his fists. "Shi Wenguang, thanks sir for your help. There is nothing I can do to repay you. Please accept this general's bow." As he knelt, the entire family followed suit. "There's no need to be so polite, General. Rise." Yu Qianzhou rose from his seat and walked around the table to face Shi Wenguang. He smiled faintly. "Does General still remember the poem I read to you?" "I dare not forget," Shi Wenguang recited heroically. "The mountains are high, the roads are long, and the pits are deep. The army gallops unhindered. Who dares to fight on horseback? Only I, General Shi." Yu Qianzhou nodded with a smile and said, "I have cleared all of your worries for you, General. I hope that you will fulfill your promise to me. Let the people of the world live a peaceful life as soon as possible so that my efforts will not be in vain." Shi Wenguang said sincerely, "Don't worry, sir. Everything is being prepared in an orderly manner. The army will attack as soon as possible. As an outsider, I will not interfere with the matters of war. I believe in your abilities, General. You just need to follow our previous agreement and do as you wish." Yu Qianzhou cupped his fists at everyone. "I shall not disturb your family reunion. I shall take my leave first." "Boss." Shi Xiaotian shouted anxiously. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. "What else do you want?" Shi Xiaotian begged with a bitter expression. "Don't leave me behind. Bring me to the cultivation world." At this moment, Shi Yutian also jumped out. He nodded and bowed. "Sir, please take me with you." Yu Qianzhou rolled his eyes. He ignored Shi Yutian and stared at Shi Xiaotian. "What are you going to do? You are not weak now. Protecting your family is the right thing to do. Ling Feng and the others will help you. But remember, as a cultivator, you should not interfere with the matters of war. Otherwise I will not forgive you." With that said, he disappeared from the tent without giving Shi Xiaotian a chance to speak. Everyone in the tent searched everywhere, but they couldn't find any trace of Yu Qianzhou. Shi Xiaotian glared at his big brother. He might be the one who ruined everything. Shi Yutian walked to the side with a guilty conscience. Shi Wenguang looked around and sighed. "What a godly man." Li Hongyang came over and said, "It's all thanks to you, sir. Otherwise, I don't know when our family will be reunited." Chapter 681. There were few people in the vast mountain range. In the deep belly of the mountain, there were 3 towering peaks connected to each other. The mountains were so steep that they pierced through the clouds. Waterfalls splashed on the mountainside, and streams gurgled at the foot of the mountain. Sometimes, beasts would drink by the stream and birds would fly over the forest. It was a peaceful and beautiful scene. Looking up the mountain, one could faintly see the buildings on the 3 peaks. There was no path leading to the summit at the foot of the mountain. If mortals saw this, they would definitely think that the mountain was the residence of immortals. In fact, the people who lived on the summit were no longer mortals. This was the Daluo sect, the second largest righteous sect in Huaxia's cultivation world. Under the bright sun, the glazed roof and eaves reflected brilliant colors under the wind and clouds on the mountaintop. From afar, the three peaks shone with colorful lights, like three pearls worshipped between heaven and earth. It was not a blessed land of immortals, but it was better than one. The majestic hall in the middle of the three peaks was called Lingxiao Hall. It was the central decision-making area of the Daluo sect. At this time, dozens of people sat on the ground in the hall, facing the one-armed sect master Luo Qingtian, who was sitting in the center. The people in the hall didn't look good. There was no other reason than the soul formation masters from the various countries were like sharp blades on their necks, able to take their lives at any time. The disaster of annihilation could happen in an instant. No one could imagine how terrifying the legendary soul formation masters were. When such a person descended, the scene would make people shudder. In fact, this fear wasn't only shrouded in the Daluo sect. All the major sects were looking for a solution. No one would sit still and wait for death. However, Yu Qianqiu, who caused a stir in the various countries, suddenly made everyone's eyes light up. All the major sects had their eyes on Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, who was known as the #1 master below the soul formation stage and had a good relationship with several other soul formation masters, had undoubtedly become the savior in everyone's eyes. However, what made the Daluo sect depressed was that the person who could help them out of this crisis was not someone else but Yu Qianqiu. The Daluo sect and Yu Qianqiu didn't just have a small misunderstanding but several feuds. You want your enemy to help you solve the crisis? It would be best if they didn't hit him when he was down. Despite their worries, the upper echelons of the Daluo sect firmly believed that profit was the eternal pursuit of the cultivation world. Hatred was nothing in the face of profit. Many examples throughout the ages had proven this point. The upper echelons of the Daluo sect had decided to part with a large portion of the wealth that the sect had accumulated over the past 1,000 years, a total of 3 billion high-grade spirit stones. They believed that no one in the world could refuse such a large sum of wealth. As far as the exalted sect was concerned, the sect's accumulated wealth was meant to be used in times of crisis. As long as the sect could survive this crisis, there would always be a chance to earn back the money. However, what made the upper echelons of the Daluo sect disappointed was that the people they sent to the Wu clan to look for Yu Qianqiu didn't even have a chance to speak to Yu Qianqiu before they were chased out. The upper echelons of the Daluo sect believed that it was because Yu Qianqiu didn't know how large the wealth was. Therefore, Luo Qingtian personally contacted the Wu clan's patriarch, Wu Sihai, and secretly revealed the number of spirit stones, hoping that Wu Sihai could help pass the message to Yu Qianqiu. Soon, Luo Qingtian waited for Wu Sihai to pass the message to Yu Qianqiu, and it was a simple sentence. Some things can't be changed no matter how much money you have. It seems that we can't count on Yu Qianqiu. Luo Qingtian sighed and looked at the elders in the Lingxiao hall. Elders, do you have any other ideas? The hall fell into silence again. Zhu Xianxian, who was in the crowd, suddenly asked, "Sect Master, I wonder what the consecrators mean?" Many people looked at him with some resentment in their eyes. They all felt that if he hadn't become enemies with Yu Qianqiu several times, they wouldn't have fallen into such a difficult situation today. Luo Qingtian shook his head slightly. The consecrators don't have any better ideas. Show that you will obey any decision of the sect. If that's the case. Zhu Xianxian muttered, "I have an idea but I don't know if I should say it." Everyone looked surprised. An elder beside him frowned and said, "Elder Zhu, what time is it now? If you have any ideas, just say it and let everyone discuss it. Why are you hesitating?" Luo Qingtian also nodded and signaled him to say it quickly. Zhu Xianxian's eyes flickered. Our Chinese cultivation world has fallen into such a precarious situation because we have been complacent. Maybe we can look further. Since we know that we are not the opponents of the various countries, why do we have to be opponents? Maybe it's a good choice to be friends. For example, we can try to send people to contact other countries. Since we are willing to take out 3 billion high-grade spirit stones, I believe we can make friends with them. As soon as he said that, everyone was shocked. The hall was so quiet that the sound of ants crawling could be heard. Everyone looked at each other. Suddenly, someone stood up and pointed his finger at Zhu Xianxian. He shouted angrily, "Zhu Xianxian, how can you say such words that forget your ancestors? What's the difference between this and being a traitor of the Chinese cultivation world? Elder Hong." Zhu Xianxian shouted and stood up abruptly. He said tit for tat, "This is just a method that I have no other choice. Besides, everyone asked me to say it. How can you say that I forget my ancestors? Besides, who said that being friends with various countries is forgetting my ancestors? Yu Qianshou is a good example. Didn't he also make friends with the soul formation stage masters of various countries? Why didn't anyone say that he forgot his ancestors and betrayed the Chinese cultivation world? Instead, everyone begged him? No matter what, I am also thinking about the eternal foundation of the Daluo sect. If everyone thinks that this method is inappropriate, you don't have to use it. Is there a need to put such a big hat on me? You're twisting words and forcing logic. Elder Hong was almost speechless. Compared to Zhu Xianxian, who had been practicing outside for a long time, his eloquence was worse. Alright, stop arguing. Luo Qingtian shouted and stood up. He looked at the two people who were arguing and said, to put it bluntly, Yu Qianshou's reputation was built in various countries. If we, the dignified Daluo sect, take out a large amount of spirit stones to go to other countries to make friends, we are completely different from Yu Qianshou. Don't say such words in the future. As long as I, Luo Qingtian, am still the leader of the Daluo sect, I will not agree to such things. Besides, things haven't developed to the end yet. Who can be sure that there won't be a turn for the better? At the same time, there was a sudden, dang 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 sound of alarm coming from outside the hall. It echoed in the sky above the entire Daluo sect. Everyone in the hall sprung up at the same time and looked out of the hall, only to hear several disciples shouting anxiously, "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" With the cultivation of everyone in the hall, they immediately heard the dense sound of flying coming from all directions. Some of the faster ones had already reached the top of the hall in an instant. Everyone's expression changed. A cold light flashed from their storage bags and rushed into the sky without hesitation. With a bang, it directly blasted the roof of the Lingxiao Hall. Chapter 682. The moment the roof was blasted open by the swords, a dozen or so huge sword auras descended from the sky and knocked away the flying swords. They were like a dozen or so huge icicles that pierced into the numinous sky hall. Boom boom. The deafening sound masked the shrill cries of pain. The entire numinous sky hall began to tremble. Wood, stone, and debris flew in all directions. Smoke and dust rose and people flew everywhere in a daze. A few corpses were left in the hall, while the rest broke through the walls with their palms. At this critical moment, no one cared about the numinous sky hall. Saving their lives was the most important thing. Moreover, the numinous sky hall had already been destroyed by the enemy's attack. As soon as the people rushed out of the hall, they were struck by the fierce attacks from above. They did not even have the chance to see who the enemy was. They had to dodge the fatal attacks first. Not only the numinous sky hall, but the halls on the other two mountains were also being attacked crazily at the same time. The Daluo sect's consecration hall, in particular, had more than 100 people gathered in the sky. They struck out more than 100 sword auras and tore down the entire hall in an instant. The attack was so vicious and crazy that it was hard to imagine. It was as if they did not intend to give the enemy any chance to catch their breath. The moment the consecration hall collapsed, a dozen or so figures with angry roars exploded towards the attacking people in the sky. They instantly entered the crowd of people in the sky and engaged in a chaotic battle. In an instant, light shone in all directions, and loud rumbling sounds reverberated in the sky. Screams of pain could be heard and corpses continuously fell from the sky. "Get out of the way!" With a loud shout, the 100 or so people in the sky above the consecration hall dispersed. At the same time, a dozen or so figures charged towards the dozen or so people who rushed out from below. The two groups of experts at the end of the tribulation passing stage fiercely collided and fought crazily with no regard for their lives. The outcome of these dozen or so people was the key to the outcome of the entire battle. In the sky around Luoshao Mountain, a dense crowd of people continuously swarmed over. The colors were black and white. Most of the people in black were men while the people in white were women. It was a very strange attack combination. All disciples fight. Someone on top of Luoshao Mountain roared furiously. Countless silhouettes shot out from the top of the mountain. No one knew where they came from, but they rushed towards the crowd that was besieging them. Soon, both sides started fighting crazily. The sea of clouds around Mount Luoshao immediately started to churn, as if countless rocks had been thrown into a calm lake. The wind became stronger and a chaotic aura filled the air. Amidst the continuous rumbling, the entire Luoshao Mountain seemed to be shaking. The beasts and birds at the foot of the mountain all stopped moving and looked up curiously. Suddenly, a corpse fell down at lightning speed. The cheerful stream splashed high waves with a bang. The smell of blood spread, and the stream was instantly mixed with dark red as it flowed down. Then the second and third corpses fell. Corpses fell everywhere, and the beasts and birds were so frightened that they fled in all directions. In the dense forest at the foot of the mountain, a large number of black-clothed and masked men had appeared out of nowhere. Only a pair of eyes could be seen as they quietly lurked in the wilderness. Yu Qianqiu silently stood on a big tree and looked up at the peak of the mountain. After seeing that the battle had already started, he expressionlessly waved his hand and pointed at Mount Luoxiao with force. Zhang Peng, who was staring at him under the tree, immediately turned around and ordered loudly after receiving the order, "Attack according to the original plan." In an instant, a dense group of black-clothed men suddenly appeared in the deep forest. With Mount Luoxiao as the center, they quickly surrounded it. Starting from the foot of Mount Luoxiao, they spread upwards in a three-dimensional manner, gradually shrinking the encirclement towards the Daluo sect at the peak of the mountain. This was an attack team made up of 6,000 members of Utopia. It was the largest combined attack of the Utopia army. The order the 6,000 Tribulation Transcendence experts received was, "Kill every disciple of the Daluo sect. Leave no one alive." "Lady Jianghu, it's you?" Luo Qingtian angrily raised his sword and pointed at the sky. The Daluo sect has no grudges with the Moon sect. Even if there were some small conflicts, there's no need to make such a big fuss. Why did you sneak attack the Daluo sect? He had already lost an arm. Now, with his messy clothes, the dignified leader of the Daluo sect looked extremely disheveled. The 6 elders stood with their backs to him. Until now, their expressions were still filled with panic and disbelief. Everything had happened so suddenly. In the blink of an eye, only 6 of the dozens of elders were left. The intensity of the battle was beyond their imagination. The Moon sect had actually sent more than 10 tribulation cultivators to sneak attack them. There were 7 in the final stage of the tribulation alone. The beautiful woman pointed at by the sword in the sky was the previous leader of the Moon sect, Lady Jianghu. She was also Fairy Jade Flower's master. Lady Jianghu stared down coldly and said, "Leader Luo, don't you think it's too late to say this now? The Moon sect isn't the only one targeting the Daluo sect. Why don't you take a good look first?" Luo Qingtian suddenly looked around and realized that the Moon sect disciples in white were only targeting the Lingxiao Hall's mountain. The other 2 mountains were being attacked by a group of cultivators in black. Luo Qingtian's pupils constricted and he exclaimed, 10,000 demons. Then he suddenly stared at Lady Jianghu and shouted angrily, "The Moon sect belongs to the righteous path. How dare you ally with the 10,000 demons to attack the Daluo sect? You deserve to die." "It's not the Moon sect that deserves to die, it's the Daluo sect. Who told you to offend someone you shouldn't have? From today onwards, the Daluo sect will no longer exist in the cultivation world. The Moon sect will become the second largest sect of the righteous path." A cold smile appeared on Lady Jianghu's face. It was an almost perverted smile. When it appeared on a woman's face, it was disgusting. Her expression was like that of a cat playing with a mouse. Suddenly, a cold voice came from afar. "Lady Hua, what are you talking about? Hurry up and take care of that side. Come and help. Finish the battle quickly. Don't be late." Jianghu turned to stare at a black-robed, silver-haired, and skinny old man in the middle of a fierce battle. She replied disdainfully, "Yan Wuchen, I know what to do. I don't need you to teach me. If you think you're no match for Luo Qingtian, why don't you say something? I'll definitely help you." Yan Wuchen sneered. He was about to speak when the elder in black who was fighting with him scolded, "Lady Hua, you bitch. How dare you collude with Yan Wuchen? You'll die a horrible death." This person was Luo Qingtian's master and the previous leader of the Daluo sect, Luo Guang. Boom. Yan Wuchen and Luo Guang fiercely collided. Their hair and robes shook violently. The 2 of them crossed their swords and blocked each other. Almost simultaneously, they quickly swung their palms towards each other. Bang! A deafening sound rang out. The 2 of them weren't shaken apart. Instead, their palms and fingers intertwined, grabbing each other. A powerful shockwave spread in all directions. The 2 of them were in a stalemate. From the twisted expressions on their faces, it could be seen that they were in a stalemate. It seemed like the difference in their cultivation wasn't that great. However, Yan Wuchen still forced a smile and laughed at his opponent. "Old man Luo, you actually dared to call Lady Jianghu a bitch? Hee. Good scolding, I like it." Luo Guang immediately spat, "Don't take pleasure in my misfortune. If you have the time, think about your son and grandson. I'm guessing they've already been torn to pieces. I'll wait and see. Let's see if you, Yan Wuchen, can still laugh after seeing your son die. The surrounding people were already in a mess. This group of old and experienced people were not willing to be at a disadvantage. Even their words were not to be outdone. On the other side, Lady Jianghu was already trembling in anger after being called a bitch by the two of them. When she calmed down, she immediately pointed at Luo Qingtian and the others and screamed, "Kill them, kill them!" Yan Wuchen's face darkened after hearing Luo Guang's words. He could no longer laugh. On the other hand, Luo Guang's expression changed because of Lady Jianghu's words. The two of them opened their eyes wide. A powerful shockwave exploded between them. Boom! The two of them were blasted away. Luo Guang's figure quickly rushed towards Lady Jianghu. He hurriedly shouted in the air, "All worshippers, follow me and protect the sect leader." In an instant, the 10 people who were fighting with the 10,000 demons all disregarded everything and chased after them. Naturally, the 10,000 demons would not let them go. They immediately chased after them. However, after chasing for a short distance, they stopped in the air again. They all looked back at Yan Wuchen, who was slowly flying towards them. They did not know what he meant by asking them to wait. Yan Wuchen flashed and joined the 10,000 demons who were in the late tribulation passing stage. He looked at Lady Jianghu and the others who were being forced into a panic. He secretly transmitted a message to his own people. "What's the hurry? The Deluo sect's defeat is already decided. If we can let the Deluo sect kill Lady Jianghu and the others before this, wouldn't that be even better? Surround them. Don't let them escape. We just need to prepare to clean up the final mess." The 10,000 demons who were in the late tribulation passing stage immediately understood Yan Wuchen's plan. They all looked at the former palace lord with admiration. He did not lose his head in the fierce battle and instantly grasped the most advantageous situation for the 10,000 demons. No wonder he was once the leader of the diabolism. Think about it. The Moon sect only had 7 people in the late tribulation passing stage, while the Deluo sect had 15. If the two sides continued to fight, the Moon sect would definitely suffer a great loss. The Deluo sect would also be fighting with their lives on the line. When the 10,000 demons cleaned up the mess, it would be even easier. In short, whether it was the destruction of the Deluo sect or the great loss of the Moon sect, it was a loss for the righteous path. On the other hand, the 10,000 demons and the diabolism had a great advantage. There were 18 people in the Moon sect. Among them, 11 were in the middle tribulation passing stage and 7 were in the late tribulation passing stage. Originally, it should have been easy to deal with the remaining 6 people. After all, there was not a single person in the late tribulation passing stage among the 6. However, in just a few words, the situation suddenly changed. No one expected the 15 Deluo sect's worshippers to counterattack. Chapter 683. By now, everyone could tell that the 10,000 demons were going easy on them. Jianghu's side was under a lot more pressure. It was the combined attack of 15 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation. The 7 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation of the Moon clan couldn't even protect themselves, let alone the other 11. The 11 women were immediately violently ravaged. Facing the joint attack of 15 cultivators at the end of the crossing tribulation stage, each of them perished. Jianghu almost vomited blood. She regretted not killing Luo Qingtian and the other 5 earlier. Now Yan Wuchen had taken advantage of her. As the previous leader of the Moon clan, Jianghu was definitely not stupid. She could see through Yan Wuchen's evil intentions, but so what? The cultivation world was full of deceit and danger could happen in an instant. She was useless if she couldn't guard against it. Jianghu looked over angrily. Yan Wuchen, who was wearing a black robe and had silver hair, was watching the fight with a smile. The 13 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation also ignored the disciples of the 10,000 demons. Instead, they watched mockingly as the women were tortured by a group of people. The 11 women in the middle phase of the tribulation were no match for the 15 cultivators from the Deluo sect. They were all killed in the blink of an eye. Jianghu fought back with all her might. She yelled furiously, "Yan Wuchen! You're despicable. TSK 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 TSK. Yan Wuchen shook his head and laughed. Jianghu, I meant well. You should appreciate it. Old Luo called you AB***, and even I can't stand it anymore. I'm giving you a chance to kill old Luo yourself. Sigh. I'm the despicable one now. Tell me, what's the point of this?" The last sentence was directed at the dozen cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation. Hearing this, more than a dozen people immediately looked up to the sky and laughed wildly, showing the arrogant demeanor of the demonic Tao. Jianghu was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. But she knew this wasn't the time to be impulsive. While fighting off the attacks of the two cultivators from the Daluo sect, she shouted, "Yan Wuchen, do you really want to watch? If you ruin Yu Qianzhou's plan, your 10,000 demons won't have a good ending either." Yan Wuchen surveyed his surroundings. He was confident that the final outcome would not be out of his control, and that it would not affect Yu Qianzhou's plans. He snorted coldly and said, "Jianghu, I know what to do. I don't need you to teach me. If you think that you're no match for old man Luo, you might as well tell me and I'll lend you a hand." He repeated Jianghu's words back to Jianghu, word for word. Without a doubt, he was telling Jianghu, "You were the one who was heartless first, so don't blame me for being unjust later." This sentence made Jianghu speechless. She did not expect retribution to come so quickly. The mention of Yu Qianzhou in their conversation shocked the people from the Daluo sect. They vaguely guessed the reason why the 10,000 demons had joined forces with the Moon sect. It seemed that Yu Qianzhou was here for revenge. Luo Qingtian, who was surrounded and protected by the 6 elders, had a look of determination in his eyes. He immediately sent a message to the 15 masters who were attacking fiercely. "Masters, it's enough to trap the people from the Moon sect, but don't kill them. The turning point of the Daluo sect today lies with the people from the Moon sect." As the leader of the Daluo sect, he spoke. The fierce attacks of the 15 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage from the Daluo sect eased up. Luo Qingtian looked at the 15 consecrators fighting fiercely and sighed with emotion in his heart. The reason why a big sect could become a big sect was because of the existence of these mainstays. Every time there was a big change, the sect could be supported and not fall. Had it not been for the support of these 15 elders, the Grand Immortal sect would have already collapsed, let alone his own life. Jianghu's group of 7 naturally felt that their opponents' attacks had weakened. It seemed that they did not want to kill them. This made the 7 secretly feel strange. They even suspected that there was a bigger conspiracy behind this. Could it be that they wanted to capture them alive? Yan Wuchen's eyes narrowed. He also saw that something was wrong. The 13 masters in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage from the 10,000 demons were also surprised. They all saw something strange. But they could not figure out what the Daluo sect was up to. Luo Qingtian, who looked a little disheveled, now had the heroic spirit of a leader. He shouted loudly, "Jianghu, you and I belong to the righteous path. We should not fight to the death. If we continue to fight, it will only benefit the demons. It will be the righteous path that will suffer losses. I believe that the Moon sect was bewitched by others. Now that we are both in a critical situation, why don't we join hands and fight against the demons together? As long as we can defeat the 10,000 demons together today, I, Luo Qingtian, as the leader of the Daluo sect, swear that I will not pursue the matter of the Moon sect attacking the Daluo sect. I will pretend that this never happened. Jianghu, what do you think?" As soon as he said this, the 3 masters were shocked. The faces of the 10,000 demons changed. The Daluo sect already had one more master in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage than the 10,000 demons. Plus, they were fighting on the territory of the Daluo sect. The reason why they attacked the Daluo sect this time was that the Moon sect was willing to send 7 masters in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage. That was why they had the confidence to win. If the 7 masters from the Moon sect turned against them, and the 15 from the Daluo sect joined hands, the 10,000 demons would definitely lose. Yan Wuchen looked at Luo Qingtian with a complicated expression. He secretly admired him. Luo Qingtian was indeed the leader of the Daluo clan. He was able to let go at the most critical moment. So many elders of the Moon clan had been killed, but he was still able to calm down and deal with the situation calmly. He was able to let go of the blood feud so easily. The 15 masters from the Daluo sect immediately understood Luo Qingtian's intention. They knew that the dead could not come back to life. Protecting the Daluo sect was their top priority. The leader's decision was right. Luo Guang looked at his disciple with relief and said loudly, "Jianghu, we will follow the leader's order. What do you think? I hope you can make a decision quickly." His words contained a hint of support for Luo Qingtian, but there was also a hint of a threat to Jianghu. Jianghu hesitated. She believed Luo Qingtian's words, but how was she going to explain it to Yu Qianzhou? When the Moon sect received news from Hua Rui from Hat Island, they also hesitated whether to join hands with the 10,000 demons to attack the Daluo sect. After a closed-door analysis by the higher-ups of the Moon sect, they felt that the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. First, Yu Qianqiu promised to help the Moon Sect when the soul formation cultivators from other countries threatened the Moon Sect. Second, after killing the Daluo sect, the Moon Sect would naturally become the second largest sect of the righteous path. This was the secret desire of the Moon Sect for many years. Third, after destroying the Daluo sect, Yu Qianqiu promised not to take any of the Daluo sect's wealth. The Moon Sect and the 10,000 demons would split it among themselves. As for the fourth condition, Yu Qianqiu threatened that since the Moon Sect already knew the secret, if they didn't agree he would take care of the Moon Sect. The Moon Sect had no choice but to agree. But now, Jianghu really hesitated. If they joined hands with the Daluo sect they would offend Yu Qianqiu. If they didn't, the 10,000 demons' actions were too infuriating. They had caused the deaths of 11 cultivators from the Moon Sect. Just then Yan Wuchen chuckled awkwardly. He didn't expect to shoot himself in the foot. He said loudly, Jianghu, we're even now. Don't fall for other people's tricks. Now you and I will continue to work together and destroy the Daluo sect. What do you think? The 10,000 demons and the Daluo sect all became alert. The Moon Sect's decision could decide the outcome of the battle. Hey, who are they? One of the 10,000 demons suddenly pointed at the masked men in black who were about to reach the other two mountains. If one didn't pay attention they would think that they were from the 10,000 demons because they were all dressed in black. But these people all had their faces covered. They obviously weren't from the 10,000 demons. But the strange thing was that these masked men didn't target the 10,000 demons. They only targeted the Daluo sect disciples. The people from the Daluo sect looked over and their expressions changed. Luo Qingtian frowned. He felt a deep sense of danger. The masked men in black didn't attack quickly, but they cooperated with each other very well. They surrounded the Daluo sect disciples layer by layer. They would rather slow down than let a single Daluo sect disciple go. The Daluo sect disciples couldn't resist at all. As soon as they collided with them they were immediately killed. Such a strict and brutal fighting style that left no survivors, and the flawless coordination, was a ghastly sight to behold. The most frightening thing was that these masked men were all at the early stage of tribulation passing. Occasionally, a Daluo sect disciple in the middle stage of tribulation passing would be surrounded and killed by more than a dozen masked men. Even a Daluo sect disciple in the middle stage of tribulation passing couldn't stop them. Obviously, without a top expert to stop them, the Daluo sect disciples could only wait to be slaughtered. However, the Daluo sect's top experts in the late stage of tribulation passing were all trapped here. They couldn't go over to help. They could only watch as the black net closed in. Yan Wuchen looked at it and was stunned at first. Then he laughed and said, needless to say, Yu Qianqiu has arranged for a third party. It seems that Yu Qianqiu is determined to win. He was relieved now. In such a situation, if Jianghu was not stupid, she would naturally know what to do. Jianghu only took a few glances and was shocked. She didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to have a backup plan. She didn't know if there were any other arrangements. Fortunately, she didn't agree to the Daluo sect's request. She rolled her eyes and shouted, Yan Wuchen, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and attack. The meaning of this sentence was obvious. Luo Guang immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. Jianghu, you old bitch. I won't forgive you. His figure shot out and a palm shadow with the force of a mountain shot towards Jianghu. The shockwave swept out like a hurricane. Even the other late-stage tribulation passing experts had to retreat and hurriedly move out of the way. The Daluo mountain-splitting palm was a palm that Luo Guang had used all his cultivation in a fit of rage. Its power was so ferocious that even Luo Guang couldn't measure it. He hated Jianghu for her fickleness. Earlier, he had shown her mercy, hoping that she would change sides. He didn't expect that by sparing her life, his side would fall into a desperate situation. Chapter 684. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have had high hopes for this bitch. He would have killed her as soon as possible. This angry palm seemed to have the intention of taking Jianghu's life back. Jianghu was shocked. She didn't expect Luo Guang's palm to be so powerful. She knew she couldn't block it and wanted to teleport away, but it was too late. Bang! A heavy palm landed on Jianghu's disappearing figure. Teleportation was no longer possible. Jianghu's entire body was sent flying. She coughed up a mouthful of blood while in midair. She had misjudged and was seriously injured. If she had fought back forcefully, even if she couldn't block it, she wouldn't be so badly injured. After all, the difference in cultivation between them wasn't too great. They were both experts of the same level. She had chosen to escape, but she hadn't. It was equivalent to being hit by the palm. Yen Bugue was shocked at first, but then a strange smile appeared on his face. The Daluo sect was already attacking the 7 from the Moon Clan, but he didn't give the order for the 10,000 demons to attack. The 10 or so experts from the 10,000 demons looked at each other and didn't do anything. They understood that the palace master still wanted to kill them with a borrowed knife. Clan master. The remaining people from the Moon Clan cried out. But they were all in danger and couldn't spare a hand to save Huayangu. In his anger, Luo Guang swore to kill Huayangu. He dashed forward and chased after Huayangu. Facing the body that had lost the ability to move in the air, he struck out with his palm again. The heaven-shaking palm struck out with a momentum that could destroy everything. It really had the power to split a mountain. Huayangu was seriously injured and had lost the ability to defend herself. If this palm hit her again, she would definitely be chopped into pieces. But at this moment, a figure suddenly dashed up from the foot of the mountain. That person seemed to be shocked when he jumped out. He looked at the person in his arms in disbelief. Why did a beautiful woman come to him? That was too much. Damn. Daluo mountain splitting palm. That person let out a strange cry. He suddenly noticed the huge palm-shaped astral image that was coming at him. Since he could call out its name, it was obvious that this was not his first time coming into contact with the Daluo mountain splitting palm. At the same time as he let out a strange cry, he had already waved his sleeves. A dense mass of black light flashed out, directly shooting towards the incoming palm silhouette. Hiss hiss hiss. The dense mass of black light emitted a sound similar to that of a sharp blade cutting through paper. The palm silhouette collapsed with a loud rumble, causing waves of chi to surge out in all directions. The Daluo mountain splitting palm was instantly broken. Luo Guang, who was chasing after him, was shocked. He quickly stopped in his tracks and looked at the young man in front of him in shock. He could not imagine that his palm attack would be broken so easily. This person was none other than Yu Qianqiu, who came up from the foot of the mountain. Coincidentally, he caught Huayangu, who had been sent flying, the moment he arrived. It was also Huayangu's good fortune that he had saved her. Old thing, how dare you sneak attack me? Yu Qianqiu hugged Huayangu with one arm. His face was gloomy. The black flying sword returned to his sleeve. Who are you? Luo Guang asked cautiously. Luo Qingtian recognized Yu Qianqiu at a glance. The two of them had fought before, and his broken arm was thanks to Yu Qianqiu. Naturally, Luo Qingtian had a deep impression of Yu Qianqiu. Zhu Xianxian, who was lucky enough to survive, also had a deep impression of him. Zhu Xianxian's pupils shrank as he shouted, "Honored Elder Luo, this person is Yu Qianqiu, the one who has always been against our Daluo sect. He is also the mastermind behind this sneak attack on our Daluo sect." Listening to his words, it was obvious that he was encouraging Luo Guang to kill Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu swept a cold glance at Zhu Xianxian and sneered, "Old dog, you're really lucky to still be alive. I hope you'll continue to be lucky today and leave this place alive." "You're Yu Qianqiu?" Luo Guang pointed in all directions and shouted angrily, "You're the mastermind behind the attack on my Daluo sect." Yu Qianqiu shook his head indifferently and said, "I'm not the mastermind behind the attack on your Daluo sect, but the mastermind behind the extermination of your Daluo sect." Extermination. His words were cold. In fact, he had been preparing for this day for a long time and had been looking forward to it for a long time. Before coming here, he had stored up enough blue fire and black fire elements in his body to put an end to this matter once and for all. This was a knot in his heart that he could not forget, and he had to end it. Luo Guang looked around and saw the Daluo sect disciples falling one by one. The masked men in black seemed to be afraid that the fallen Daluo sect disciples would not die a complete death, so they did not forget to kill them. This was a blatant bloodbath. Haha. Luo Guang suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed until tears streamed down his face. In his heart, he had a vague feeling that the Daluo sect would not have a tomorrow. He knew that there was no such thing as an everlasting sect in this world, but he never thought that this day would befall the Daluo sect so suddenly, without any warning. After laughing bitterly, he waved his sword and said, "All right, I heard that the number 1 expert below the soul formation stage has appeared in Wuxia's cultivation world. Today I'd like to experience it for myself." The flying sword in his hand turned into a silver rainbow and shot toward Yu Qianqiu with a shocking aura. He waved his palms and chased after the flying sword, breaking through the wind and shooting out. One man and one sword attacked in a frenzy that complemented each other. "You're overestimating yourself." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. Yen Wuqian and the other experts of the 10,000 demons stared at the scene unblinkingly. Luo Qingtian and the others also held their breaths and watched with rapt attention. They all wanted to see what kind of ability this rumored number one expert below the soul formation stage had to be able to cause such a huge commotion among the many powerful experts in the various countries. Before the sword arrived, the strong wind was already surging toward them. Yu Qianqiu was unfazed in the face of all this, and he was still holding the unconscious Jianghu in one arm. Suddenly he narrowed his eyes slightly. While facing the aggressive wind, he quickly swung his other arm, and two of his fingers brazenly flicked at the silver arc that was charging at him. Ding! A crisp sound rang out, and the flying sword temporarily stopped in the air. The powerful airflow that the flying sword had condensed instantly collapsed and exploded in a chaotic manner. The flying sword disappeared, and all that could be seen was silver dust dancing in the air, swirling chaotically along with the chaotic airflow. Yan Wuchen and the others' eyes widened, and their mouths gaped so wide that an egg could fit inside. Their faces were filled with disbelief. In that instant just now, the flying sword had actually been shattered into dust by Yu Qianqiu's two fingers. Oh my god! Just how powerful was his cultivation? No wonder he was the number one expert below the soul formation stage whose name shook the world. Just how powerful would a true soul formation stage cultivator be? Everyone began to ask themselves this question. Thinking about the terrifying scene of a soul formation expert descending upon the cultivation world of Wuxia, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Hi! Luo Guang sped up and shot over. Not only did the flying sword's fate not scare him, but it also made him rush over even faster. Things seemed a little strange. Because Yu Qianqiu was facing the charging Luo Guang, he could see the expression on Luo Guang's face better than anyone else. Seeing the generous smile on Luo Guang's face, he suddenly remembered the expression on Yin Baikong's face before he self-destructed his Dantian in the cornucopia. The two of them had almost the same smile. Yu Qianqiu's pupils constricted, and the words self-destruct his Dantian flashed through his mind. In his shock, the two fingers that were still hanging in the air after shattering the flying sword quickly turned into palms and faced Luo Guang. Bang! A soft explosion sounded from Luo Guang's body. A cloud of white mist exploded and enveloped Luo Guang's entire body. The white mist was sucked into Yu Qianqiu's palms, and Luo Guang, who appeared from the white mist, shocked everyone. Even the experts of the Daluo sect and Moon clan who were fighting in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage stopped in shock. They had taken time to pay attention to what was going on, and in the end they saw a scene that they shouldn't have seen. Luo Guang's old but strong body instantly became as thin as a piece of firewood. He had already lost the momentum of charging forward, and all that was left was inertia. Yu Qianqiu casually waved his hand, and a gust of wind that was not very powerful blew him into the air. It was a very strange scene. The body that was floating in the air seemed to be very light, as if it had fallen apart in the air, and a pile of things fell from it. When the body completely fell to the ground, it seemed like there was nothing inside the clothes. A shriveled head with skin and two black holes in its eye sockets rolled out with a gurgling sound. A crack suddenly appeared in the skull, and it split into two pieces, shaking non-stop on the ground. A gust of wind blew over, and the two pieces of skulls, along with a large pile of things on the ground, were blown away. A few pieces of clothes floated in the air. Such a strange scene caused everyone to be dumbfounded. Their expressions were indescribable as they swallowed their saliva with great difficulty. The experts of the Daluo sect couldn't help but look around, shaking their heads. Did Luo Guang disappear just like that? In the end, everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu with fear in their eyes. They had never heard of such a method of killing, and the sight of it was horrifying. Right now Yu Qianqiu was like a devil in their eyes. As for the women of the Moon sect, they looked at Jianghu, who was still in Yu Qianqiu's hands, and couldn't help but shiver. They were afraid that Jianghu would accidentally disappear like Luo Guang. It took Yu Qianqiu a while to regain his composure. It was too dangerous just now. If he didn't react in time, Luo Guang would have successfully detonated his Dantian. Then he would have been out of luck. Although Luo Guang's cultivation was not as high as Yin Baikong's, if he exploded his Dantian, he would probably not be able to withstand it. He slowly put down his outstretched hand and coldly snorted, "Do you have nothing better to do? You actually want to explode your Dantian? You must be tired of living." As soon as he said that, everyone was reminded. Everyone immediately remembered the strange scene of Luo Guang speeding forward. It turned out that he wanted to explode his Dantian and perish together with Yu Qianqiu. Exploding one's Dantian. This was a way to die with both body and soul destroyed. The people of the Daluo sect felt lost. It was hard to imagine how the old sect leader could think of such a way to perish together with the enemy. Such a tragic way to die. Could it be that the old sect leader had already lost the confidence to win, and wanted to perish together with the enemy? Zhu Xianxian avoided Yu Qianzhou's stare in fear, and an uncontrollable fear lingered on his face. He had offended Yu Qianzhou several times, and never thought that Yu Qianzhou would let him go. Now that he saw Luo Guang die in such a horrifying way, his back was already drenched in cold sweat. Chapter 685. The strongest cultivator below the soul formation stage. Yan Wuchen looked at Yu Qianzhou and sighed in his heart. If only he could pull Yu Qianzhou into the 10,000 demons. What a pity. Master. The white-browed Luo Qingtian sighed and knelt on the ground. After kowtowing 3 times, he suddenly stood up and pointed his sword at Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou, the Daluo sect may have had some grudges with you, but that doesn't mean that you have to kill my entire sect. I can let you go if you kill my only son, but why are you so ruthless? Yu Qianzhou waved at a late-stage tribulation cultivator from the Moon sect and pointed at the unconscious Hua Yonggu in his arms. The woman quickly took Hua Yonggu from him. The other 5 also flashed over to help Hua Yonggu heal her injuries. Yu Qianzhou's appearance was equivalent to saving their lives. Sect leader Luo, Yu Qianzhou stared at him and said indifferently, "You are a man of your word. I have always admired you. But you're not a good father, nor are you a good sect master. Whether it's your son or the disciples of the exalted sect, you haven't done your duty to discipline and restrain them. This is the root cause of the destruction of the Daluo sect. The grudge between me and the Daluo sect was formed when I first entered the cultivation world and was still in Ongquangsung. It has nothing to do with the grudges you mentioned." Ongquangsung? Luo Qingtian's eyes flickered for a while and he said in a deep voice, "Although you Yu Qianzhou are famous now when you were in the Blue Light sect, I'm afraid no one in the Daluo sect knows who you are. Is there a need for our Daluo sect to make enemies with a disciple who has never even left the sect?" Well said. Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly and snorted coldly, "Then I'll let you die in peace. May I ask if sect leader Luo still remembers the Ongquangsung elder, Hao Sansi, who was killed by you for stealing the 7-colored Ganoderma?" Hao Sansi? Luo Qingtian frowned slightly and muttered, "I do have an impression of the rainbow Lingji. As for the injured person, is he called Hao Sansi?" The last question was directed at the person beside him. One of the elders guarding him nodded and said, "That's right, I have an impression of this matter. That elder Ongquangsung who died from his injuries was indeed called Hao Sansi. At that time, the 2 of them had met on the way back from the New Excellence Assembly and had gotten into an argument over a rainbow Lingji. The person who had injured him was Elder Zhu. However, this matter has already been settled by the Cultivation Alliance, and Ongquangsung is willing to reconcile. Many sects know about this." Luo Qingtian nodded slightly and stared at Yu Qianzhou. "Since this matter has already been settled with Ongquangsung and Ongquangsung is no longer pursuing it, why are you bringing it up again? What does this matter have to do with you?" Yu Qianzhou didn't reply to him. Instead, he stared straight at Zhu Xianxian and asked with narrowed eyes, "Zhu Xianxian, the person who injured Hao Sansi was you?" Hearing this question, Zhu Xianxian already had a bad feeling. He looked at the talkative elder with some resentment and forced himself to calm down. "That's right, the person who injured Hao Sansi was me. However, that was also because he stole the 7-colored Ganoderma that our Daluo sect found first. Am I supposed to let him take it and not do anything?" As soon as this was said, even the Daluo sect's people were silent. They could hear the loophole in his words. Yan Wuchen, who was watching from the side, laughed. "That's interesting. If I remember correctly, most of the elders in Ongquangsung are nascent soul cultivators. A nascent soul cultivator robbing a tribulation-passing cultivator's thing is really courting death. Moreover, who would believe that a mere Ongquangsung dared to rob the Daluo sect's thing? I'm blinded by greed. What wouldn't I dare to do?" Zhu Xianxian continued to defend himself. "Blinded by greed?" Yu Qianzhou raised an eyebrow and asked indifferently, "Elder Zhu, do you know what's the relationship between Hao Sansi and me?" Here comes the problem. The Daluo sect's people suddenly looked over. This was probably the key to why Yu Qianzhou had mobilized so many people to wipe out the Daluo sect. Yan Wuchen was not surprised. The 10,000 demons had received news from Qiu Weiyuan, and the Moon sect had also received news from Huarui. Yu Qianzhou had already told the 2 sects clearly, so they both knew the relationship between Yu Qianzhou and Hao Sansi. Zhu Xianxian's heart was pounding. He didn't even have the courage to ask. Yu Qianqiu said coldly, word by word, how Sansi is An Kuangsung's master after I entered the cultivation world. I am his only disciple. He participated in the new talent assembly for me. His only goal was to fight for a foundation establishment pill for me, a disciple that everyone thinks is useless. Who knew that on the way back, he would coincidentally pick a 7-colored Ganoderma that brought him a fatal disaster. However, the sect that killed him for the treasures had instead framed him. At that time, I knelt in front of his corpse and swore that I would definitely wipe out the sect that killed him, leaving not a single chicken or dog alive. Do you know the reason now? Zhu Xinshin's face was pale and sweat appeared on his forehead. It was true that he had evil intentions when he saw the treasure. Plus, he didn't take An Kuangsung seriously. That was why he killed him for the treasure. He didn't expect to cause so much trouble. After hearing this, the Daluo sect people all looked at each other. Didn't he just kill an elder of An Kuangsung? They didn't expect that the root cause of the Daluo sect's destruction was this. Given the Daluo sect's status in the cultivation world, even if An Kuangsung still existed, he wouldn't take it seriously. Who would have thought that a disciple who had been expelled from a destroyed sect would actually swear to raise the Daluo sect to the ground 20 years ago? If anyone had heard those words back then, they would have taken it as a joke. Who would have believed them? Yan Wuchen looked at the Daluo sect people who didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Then he looked at Yu Qianqiu and was speechless. This kid was really persistent. He actually worked so hard for something like this. That vow was a joke to everyone back then. He didn't expect it to be true. Yan Wuchen looked around. It seemed that the Daluo sect was on the verge of destruction. The sounds of fighting at the foot of the mountain were getting closer and closer to the peak. Under the strong attacks of the 10,000 demons, the Moon sect, and the masked men in black, the Daluo sect disciples suffered heavy losses. They could no longer resist and were forced to retreat to the top of the mountain. More and more people gathered at the top of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the people of the Daluo sect and suddenly stared at Yan Wuchen. His face darkened. He squinted and said, "Senior Yan, why did I see the masters of the Moon sect fighting with their lives when I just came up? Are you guys just watching a show?" Yan Wuchen's old face became awkward because he was accidentally seen by someone. He immediately explained, "Yu Qianqiu, you misunderstood. It's not what you see." As he spoke, he suddenly glanced at the masters of the 10,000 demons in the late stage of the tribulation and said sternly, "The Moon sect led the Daluo sect into our encirclement. Now it's time for us to attack. Kill." With that, Yan Wuchen took the lead and rushed over. The dozen masters immediately followed him and attacked. This time the 10,000 demons didn't hold back. In addition, Luo Guang had already died in the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Both sides had 14 masters in the late stage of the tribulation against 14. One side wanted to perform well in front of Yu Qianqiu, while the other side wanted to stay alive. In an instant, the battle between the two sides became white-hot. Chapter 686. Yu Qianqiu didn't interfere with the fight. Instead, he slowly flew into the sky and observed the situation below silently. The fighting area on Luoshao Mountain was shrinking. Under the pressure of the three forces, it was like a fish net that was gradually closing. 8 out of 10 Daluo sect disciples on Luoshao Mountain had died. The remaining 20% were fighting desperately, but they were still retreating. These 20% were naturally the elite disciples of the Daluo sect. However, they had already retreated to the top of the mountain and had nowhere else to retreat. Many wanted to escape, but the masked men in black followed closely behind the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect. They were like a filter. Air could pass but humans couldn't. Anyone who wanted to escape from Luoshao Mountain would be killed. Since they were going to die either way, they might as well fight. In their grief and anger, the Daluo sect disciples unleashed their powerful combat abilities. Under the heavy siege, they actually showed signs of counterattacking. Killing one was enough, killing two was more than enough, and killing two was more than enough. These people were the elite disciples of the Daluo sect and had strong combat abilities. Once they fought without any regard for their lives, they immediately caused a lot of damage to the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect. They actually broke through the heavy siege of the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect several times, but the masked men in black at the outermost perimeter were too strong. Aside from their flawless combination attacks, a few Daluo sect disciples who were at the tribulation stage would often be attacked by dozens of masked men in black as soon as they broke out of the encirclement. These dozens of people were all experts at the tribulation stage. That scene was like a bubble that had just been blown out, and then it was punctured by someone in an instant. Those who broke through were almost instantly killed on the spot. They didn't even have a chance to fight back. The sounds of fighting and angry roars echoed on Luoxiao Mountain. Luo Qingtian looked around with sorrow. The mountain was filled with the corpses of the Daluo sect disciples. The entire mountain was covered in corpses and blood flowed like a river. Almost the entire mountain was dyed red. It was so red that it was glaring and shocking. Under the active treatment of the Moon sect, Jianghu finally woke up from her coma. Her injuries were very serious, and her internal organs were severely damaged. It was impossible for her to recover in a short period of time, let alone participate in another battle. Someone beside her told her how Yu Qianshou saved her. Huayang's eyes searched for the proud figure in the air. She helped one of them stand up stubbornly and said to the other 5, "Who said that women are not as good as men? Go help the 10,000 demons finish the battle. Don't let these stinky men look down on the women of the Moon clan." Yes. The 5 women immediately accepted the order and quickly joined the battle. With the addition of these 5 late-stage tribulation transcendence experts, the morale of Yan Wuchen and the others soared. Meanwhile, the pressure on the Daluo sect's side multiplied, and the situation worsened rapidly. The 5 women did not split up to attack. Instead, the 5 of them joined forces to help the master of the 10,000 demons. 6 of them were at the final stage of the crossing calamity stage, so the result was obvious. Not long after, the Daluo sect's late-stage tribulation transcendence expert was dismembered with a miserable howl. The 6 of them quickly joined forces and moved on to the next target. The death of the late-stage tribulation transcendence expert was a heavy blow to the Daluo sect, both in terms of strength and mentality. The Daluo sect's decline was imminent. Luo Qingqian's tiger-like eyes were filled with tears under his white eyebrows. He shouted loudly, "Masters, quickly break out of the encirclement. Don't worry about us. As long as the Daluo sect still has you, it will have a chance to rise again. After breaking out of the encirclement, quickly go to the coast of the East Sea and meet up with Luo Kuan and the other 4 masters. The Daluo sect's blood feud will depend on you." The 6 elders who were protecting him quickly raised their swords. They all knew what the sect leader meant. Now was the time to fight for their lives. However, Zhu Xianxian's face was pale. He glanced at Yu Qianshou from time to time, only to find that Yu Qianshou was also staring at him coldly. The hand holding the sword was actually trembling slightly. One of the Daluo sect's masters who was fighting immediately shouted back excitedly, "As a dignified disciple of the Daluo sect, how can I abandon the sect leader and escape? Sect leader, leave quickly. We old bones will cover you." Luo Qingtian waved his arm and stabbed his sword into the ground. A black light flashed from his storage bag, and a black token appeared in his hand. The words, "Daluo sect token," were engraved on the cloud patterns. Luo Qingtian shouted angrily, "The sect leader's token is here. Everyone in the Daluo sect, listen to my decree. As the Daluo sect leader, I issue a decree. Masters of the Daluo sect, quickly break out of the encirclement. All disciples of the Daluo sect, listen to my order. Cover the old masters at all costs to break out of the encirclement." Furious roars reverberated through the mountain peak, followed by a chorus of angry shouts. Yes, sect master's decree. The Daluo sect disciples, who had been fighting to the death, suddenly turned around and charged toward the battle between the dozens of late-stage tribulation transcendence experts on the mountain peak. In the face of death, there was no need to think about anything else. Luo Qingqian's words completely ignited their courage to fight for their dignity. Even the sect leader was willing to risk his life. They only had the thought of fighting with their lives on the line. Although there were less than 3,000 Daluo sect disciples protecting the masters, they were the most elite disciples of the Daluo sect. Their combat power was quite strong. The fact that they could last until now under the joint attack of the 3 forces was the best proof. This bloody battle had already given them the greatest glory. They were indeed the backbone of the Daluo sect and the elite disciples of the Daluo sect. These people surged forward crazily and worked together with the masters of the Daluo sect. They immediately caused a lot of trouble for Yan Wuchen and the others. After killing a few dozens or even hundreds of people rushed at them. Coupled with the help of the masters of the Daluo sect, they were even forced to the point where they were not far from death. The situation was instantly reversed. However, the 10,000 demons and the disciples of the Moon sect naturally could not watch their masters be in danger. The elder in charge of the battle of the 10,000 demons waved his sword and roared, "Kill! Destroy the Daluo sect! Kill!" The figures in black swarmed forward. The elder in charge of the battle of the Moon sect was not inferior to the men. She pointed her sword at the Deluo sect and shouted in a sharp voice, "Kill! Kill! Kill!" The white figures swarmed forward. Zhang Peng looked around the battlefield and quickly gestured to the leaders in all directions to shrink the encirclement. The battle instantly became a mess. The most intense battle was concentrated on the Ling Shao Hall's mountain from the three mountains. It was a tragic scene. The masked men in black calmly formed an encirclement. The encirclement pushed forward step by step, and the space between them also shrank. Yu Qianqiu gazed at the fierce battle below and spread his arms expressionlessly. Black lights continuously flashed in his sleeves. 2,000 flying swords made of black flames danced in the air, staring at the battle below like a tiger watching its prey. This was the first time he had displayed so many black flame flying swords in public. It was clear that he was determined to destroy the Deluo sect. Seeing the most elite disciples of the Deluo sect fall one by one, Luo Qingtian and the others clenched their teeth with tears in their eyes. It should be known that the Deluo sect had spent a lot of manpower, resources, and financial resources to cultivate these disciples. But today they were certain that it was all worth it. It was even far from enough. They felt sorry for these disciples who fell one by one. It was too tragic. The 6 elders who were protecting Luo Qingtian burst into tears and cried silently. Even Zhu Xianxian was no exception. He closed his eyes and let the hot tears slide down his face. Right now, there was only endless regret in his heart. He regretted being too greedy in the past and causing irreparable losses to the sect. Elders, let's go. Break out of the encirclement. I beg you, don't let the blood of the Deluo sect disciples be shed in vain. Luo Qingtian screamed at the sky. He suddenly pulled out his sword from the ground and shouted in sorrow, "Kill!" He rushed into the battle first. The 6 elders also roared loudly, "Kill!" Without hesitation, they charged into the fray and began to fight. The Deluo sect's elder who refused to leave took the time to wipe away the tears on his face. He shouted in a trembling voice, "Brothers, let's go. Let's break out." The 13 tearful elders of the Deluo sect burst into a sorrowful roar, "Hi!" Disregarding everything else, they rushed together and formed a sharp sword that soared into the sky. They directly tore a hole in the crowd and pierced through the sky. "Where do you think you're going?" Yan Wuchen shouted anxiously and quickly chased after them. His eyes were red from killing. However, at this moment hundreds of Deluo sect disciples rushed out from all directions and filled the hole created by the 13 elders. They desperately blocked Yan Wuchen and the others who were chasing after them. Yan Wuchen and the 5 experts of the 10,000 demons at the end of the tribulation passing stage worked together to form a sword net. Bang, bang, bang. Blood splattered everywhere. Dozens of Deluo sect disciples were immediately killed by the swords. The hole was once again opened. However, before Yan Wuchen and the others could rush out, another group of Deluo sect disciples swung their swords at them without any regard for their lives. Regardless of the huge gap in cultivation between the two sides, they forcefully blocked the hole once more. Although the Deluo sect disciples had risked their lives to give the 13 revered elders a chance to escape the encirclement, there was still a group of black-clothed men staring at them, especially Yu Qianqiu, who was waiting with his sword. The moment the 13 elders rushed into the sky, the 2,000 black fire flying swords quickly adjusted their blades and aimed at them. Yu Qianqiu sneered. "Let's see where you can run to." Before he finished speaking, the black fire flying swords instantly moved. Whoosh 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 whoosh. A dense rain of black light came down on them. The net of swords was so dense that it cut off the space for the elders to teleport away, unless they teleported back down. However, that was impossible. The Deluo sect had paid such a heavy price to let them break out of the encirclement. There was no way they could run back and tangle with Yan Wuchen and the others. The Deluo sect didn't have that many people to sacrifice. In an instant, stellar energy shields, astral swords, and the Deluo mountain splitting palm tore through the air. The 13 elders could only hope to open up another hole to escape. Unfortunately, they encountered the black fire flying swords. Stellar energy shields, astral swords, and the Deluo mountain splitting palm were their nemesis. The black fire flying swords cut through them as easily as paper. Chapter 687. Break, break, break. All the obstacles were so fragile. The black light that resembled a meteor shower glided past, and the sky suddenly became quiet. Many people subconsciously looked up. The 13 figures had lost their momentum and fell slowly. The black meteor shower that pierced through them stopped silently. The swords turned around and sped up, flying back into the sky again. The 13 figures trembled in the air and were turned into sieves again. Blood rained down and the 13 figures fell quickly. Yu Qianqiu stared down expressionlessly. The black light that flew back into the sky seemed to have completed its mission and returned to his sleeves like a swarm of locusts. No! Luo Qingtian roared in grief. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the 13 figures falling down. Suddenly he felt a chill in his chest. He slowly looked down and realized that his chest had been pierced by the flying swords of the 10,000 demons' nascent soul disciples due to his momentary lapse in concentration. Blood continued to gush out of the wound. All the Daluo sect disciples stared at the 13 figures falling down, and their faces instantly turned deathly pale. They suddenly felt that all the sacrifices and hard work had lost their meaning in that instant. The Daluo sect disciples were dazed, but the 10,000 demons and moon sect disciples who were in a frenzy of killing wouldn't show any mercy. For them, this was the best opportunity to kill their enemies and avenge their fellow sect members. How could they let it go? They almost didn't hesitate to kill. The flowing light dragged by the flying swords intertwined like a net, piercing through and bringing out bright red blood lotuses. The Daluo sect disciples who had persisted until now, the most elite disciples of the Daluo sect, trembled under the attacks of the flying swords. Some people fell on the spot. However, some people clenched their teeth and didn't fall because they really couldn't accept it. Blood gushed out like a fountain, and their clothes were already soaked in blood. Those people just held on and refused to fall. Their aura made the disciples of the palace of 10,000 demons and the Moon clan look at each other. No one actually went to touch them. In fact, the outcome of the battle was already decided. The battle could have lasted for a while, but it ended early because Yu Qianqiu quickly killed the 13 Daluo sect disciples who broke out of the encirclement. Yan Wuchen ignored these Daluo sect disciples who were still standing. He held a sword, stepped over the bodies and walked straight to Luo Qingtian. The two looked at each other. Zhu Xianxian, who was half kneeling beside Luo Qingtian, kept bleeding from the corner of his mouth. His intestines kept flowing out from the open wound in his stomach, and he kept stuffing them back. But they kept flowing out. Luo Qingtian looked down at him and said in a deep voice, "Elder Zhu, you are the only living elder of the Daluo sect. Stand up." "Yes, sect master." As soon as Zhu Xianxian spoke, blood came out of his mouth and his words were unclear. However, he still gritted his teeth and stood up. His body was on the verge of collapse as he looked around. His gaze landed on Yu Qianqiu, who was in the air. His eyes immediately widened, and he forcefully spat out a mouthful of blood from his throat. He raised his sword and pointed it at Yu Qianqiu. He angrily roared, "Yu Qianqiu, I curse you to die a horrible death. Even if I become a ghost, I won't let you go. I won't let you go." Yu Qianqiu stared down and said slowly, "Senior Yin, please take his head for me." With a flash of the sword, Zhu Xianxian's head was separated from his body. Yan Wuchen caught the falling head and threw it into the air. Then he kicked Zhu Xianxian's headless body away. Yu Qianqiu caught the flying head, looked at it by the hair, and threw it into the storage bag. Yan Wuchen said to Luo Qingtian indifferently, "Luo Qingtian, the Daluo sect will be removed from the cultivation world from today onwards." Luo Qingtian smiled faintly and said, "The 10,000 demons will have this day sooner or later. The Daluo sect is just a step ahead. I will wait for you down there." "Maybe." Yan Wuchen's lips curled into a sly smile. "Even if that day comes, I hope you will remember that you, the Daluo sect master, died under my feet." Luo Qingtian's eyes widened and he shouted angrily, "Old Yan, how dare you!" A disciple of the 10,000 demons dashed over and kicked the back of his knee. He shouted, "Kneel." Luo Qingtian's body swayed and he couldn't stand steadily. He almost knelt down, but he used his sword pillar to support himself. The disciple of the 10,000 demons wanted to continue kicking, but Yan Wuchen waved his hand to stop him. "Forget it, I was just joking with him." The disciple retreated angrily. Luo Qingtian struggled to stand up. Yan Wuchen narrowed his eyes and stared at him. "But everyone in the world will know that the Daluo sect master died in my hands." With a flash of the sword, a bloody wound appeared on Luo Qingtian's neck. There was no blood because the blood in his body was almost drained. His body, which had just stood up, fell backward and lay on the corpse of his fellow disciple. Luo Qingtian struggled to turn his head around. His unfocused eyes wanted to take another look at the Daluo sect, but he saw the disciples of the Daluo sect who would rather die than fall. A gratified smile appeared on his face as he recalled the distant past. At that time, These disciples had just joined the Daluo sect, and he was standing here on the steps of the Lingxiao Hall. He waved at these disciples who had just joined the Daluo sect and shouted in high spirits, "The Daluo sect welcomes you. From today onwards, the second-ranked Daluo sect will be your home. One day you will be proud to join the Daluo sect and the Daluo sect will be proud to have you join." Luo Qingtian's eyes stopped moving completely, but he still had a smile on his face. Yan Wuchen looked in the direction he was looking at. It was the group of Daluo sect disciples who were still standing. He waved his hand and said, "Kill them." Immediately, a group of 10,000 demons rushed out and cut down the Daluo sect disciples who were still standing. Yu Qianshou withdrew his gaze from below and nodded at Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng quickly gestured for the team to retreat. All the masked men in black quickly searched the corpses of the dead disciples. After they were done, they quickly regrouped and fled to the primeval forest at the foot of the mountain. Yan Wuchen's eyes flickered as he stared at these masked men in black who knew when to advance and when to retreat. He had some questions to ask Yu Qianshou, but he recalled how Yu Qianshou killed 13 Daluo sect consecrators in an instant. He had a lingering fear and swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. "Senior Yan." Yu Qianshou stared at the ground and said, "The Daluo sect still has some people on the coast of the East Sea, especially Luo Kuan, Cui Zhaofan, Li Mingbai and Zhu Zhao. If they are left alive they will be a disaster. We must eliminate the root of the problem." Yan Wuchen smiled. The 10,000 demons and the Moon sect have been prepared for this for a long time. From the moment we decided to attack the Daluo sect, we gathered 8 late-stage tribulation-passing experts and a large number of elite disciples to ambush them. The news of the Daluo sect being attacked must have reached the coast of the East Sea. Luo Kuan and the others are probably on their way to help. They might have already fought with us on the way. As for the Daluo sect disciples scattered around, we have already prepared a plan to deal with them. In short, kill them all. That's good. I hope we don't leave any survivors. Yu Qianshou waved his hand and pointed at the ruins of the Daluo sect. He smiled. "The battle is over. It's time for your 2 sects to divide the Daluo sect's wealth. I won't disturb you anymore. Enjoy yourselves." "Wait." Yan Wuchen stopped Yu Qianshou, who was about to leave. The latter frowned. "Is there anything else, Senior Yan?" Yan Wuchen's expression was solemn. "Although we have taken down the Daluo sect this time, the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect have both paid a heavy price. I just want to remind you that I hope you still remember what you promised us. There's no need to doubt that. Everyone knows that I, Yu Qianshou, am a man of my word. I don't need to speak of anything else, but I speak of my word." As soon as he finished speaking, Yu Qianshou cupped his hands towards the crowd below him and said, "Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, he'd fled towards the primeval forest below the mountain. The domineering Daluo sect had finally fallen. Luoshao Mountain, which originally belonged to the Daluo sect, was now occupied by the disciples of the Moon sect and the 10,000 demons. The disciples of the 2 sects searched everywhere for the Daluo sect's wealth. After dividing it, the Daluo sect's spiritual stone mine was also waiting for them. According to the previous agreement, the Daluo sect's wealth was divided into 3 equal parts. The Moon sect would get 1 and the 10,000 demons would get 2. Of course, there was a reason for this. The 10,000 demons sent out twice as many people as the Moon sect. It was the same for the experts at the end of the tribulation stage who were responsible for the main attack. Following the principle of more work, more pay, the 10,000 demons should get the lion's share. There was no doubt about that. Although the 2 sects had paid a heavy price for this battle, they had also gained a lot. The wealth that the Daluo sect had accumulated for thousands of years was not a small number. In the blink of an eye, it had become someone else's wedding dress. When the news of the Daluo sect's disappearance spread, the entire Wuxia cultivation world was shocked. Such a big thing couldn't be hidden even if they wanted to. In fact, when the 2 sects mobilized a large number of people, it attracted the attention of many other sections. It was just that no one expected the 2 sects to attack the Daluo sect. Even the Daluo sect itself didn't expect this, let alone other sections. For the various sects in the Wuxia cultivation world, this was unbelievable, especially for the orthodox sections. No one expected that the Moon sect, which was made up of a group of women and ranked 3rd on the orthodox sects, would collude with the 10,000 demons who ranked 1st on the orthodox sects, to attack the Daluo sect and the Daluo sect, which ranked 2nd on the orthodox sects. Then came the news that the Moon Sect and the 10,000 demons had joined forces to ambush Luo Kuan and a large number of the Daluo sect's people who had returned from the coast of the East Sea. Led by Luo Kuan, for masters were killed. None of the Daluo sect disciples who followed him escaped. All of them died in battle. That wasn't the end. The Daluo sect disciples who were scattered outside were ambushed on the same day. Even the disciples who were doing business in the Wu family and the Hundred Flowers Valley couldn't escape. They were lured out and killed. The Daluo sect's businesses outside were all forcibly taken over by the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect. As the saying goes, a centipede dies but it doesn't fall down. The Daluo sect was deeply rooted and had a large number of people. Under such a large-scale purge, many people still escaped. But unexpectedly, the Hong Gang and Qing Gang, which usually didn't have any conflicts with the large sects, also took action quickly. They hunted down the remaining disciples of the Daluo sect everywhere. Under the joint efforts of the three forces, almost all traces of the Daluo sect were wiped out. Chapter 688. Conspiracy. All the sects doubtlessly suspected that this was a conspiracy that had been planned for a long time. Just imagine, the three forces joined forces within a day. If it was not a conspiracy, what else could it be? However, the strength of the Daluo sect, which was ranked second on the righteous path, was undeniable. Was the Daluo sect really wiped out in a day? On Mount Luoshao, no one stopped the guests who came from all directions. All the sects sent their competent people to personally verify it. When the people who left passed by the people who came, they all shook their heads at the latter with a sigh. Soon, when the people who came later landed on Mount Luoshao, they understood what the former meant. It was a scene of devastation. The originally majestic three main halls had become ruins. The mountain top was dyed dark red with blood. There were corpses everywhere. It was almost impossible to find a place to stand. It made people wonder if this was really the world-famous Daluo sect. Rats crawled among the broken limbs. Flocks of vultures, eagles, and crows were not afraid of the people coming and going at all. They flew away in fright when they saw the people coming, but then they flew back without hesitation. They trampled on the corpses, pecked and tore them apart. This place had become their paradise. There were also vultures, eagles, and crows that came from all directions. They began to peel off piles of white bones. Dongfang Chang'ao was personally ordered by the sect leader to check and verify. He stood on a broken stone tablet. Below the stone tablet was a broken horizontal board. Although he did not read the words on the horizontal board, he could still guess that it was Lingxiao Hall from the broken handwriting. He wanted to find Luo Qingtian's body and bury it. After all, Luo Qingtian was the leader of a sect. Everyone belonged to one of the top sects in the righteous path. There was no reason for his body to be exposed and be trampled by those feathered beasts. However, he could not tell which body was Luo Qingtian's because this place had long been trampled by a group of feathered beasts. He was famous when he was alive, but what about after his death? The smell of blood in the air had yet to disperse, and the gloomy wind had yet to blow it away. It was as if there were countless spirits of the dead wandering around the mountain peak and weeping. Occasionally, someone would fly over, startling the group of feathered beasts. After looking around and confirming that the Origin Immortal sect had indeed been razed to the ground, no one dared to linger. Cupping their fists to Dongfang Chang'ao, they bid their farewells and flew off into the distance. This wasn't a good place to chat. Dongfang Chang'ao stood on top of the broken monolith, looking at those figures who were leaving with an emotionless gaze. At this moment, he suddenly thought of Yu Qianqiu's poem that was widely spread among the various countries. His gaze lingered on the clouds and dogs in the distant heaven and earth. He sighed in his heart and slowly recited in a deep tone, riding the sword to traverse the vast heaven and earth, white bones like a mountain of startled birds. The world is like a tide and people are like water. How many people in Jianghu return? How many people in Jianghu will return? The lingering sound lingered on the mountain peak, but the person on the broken tablet was nowhere to be seen. A figure disappeared into the distance. The Origin Immortal sect had been razed to the ground, and the entire cultivation world was in turmoil. The slaughter of the 10,000 demons and the Moon Clan was unanimously criticized by the entire righteous path, especially the Moon Clan. They had become traitors in the eyes of the righteous sects and received the most intense condemnation. The diabolism all remained silent. To them it was a good thing that the righteous path had suffered a heavy blow. However, the 10,000 demons had made such a big move at such a sensitive time when enemies were waiting for them. They didn't dare to flatter them. However, the destruction of the Origin Immortal sect had already become an established fact. Other than condemning them, what else could they do? Would any sect be willing to take revenge for the Origin Immortal sect? To the various sects, only the Origin Immortal sect that was still alive was valuable. The destroyed Origin Immortal sect could only support them on moral grounds and would have nothing to do with them. It was true that the Moon Clan was being condemned, but it had naturally become the second largest sect of the righteous path. At the same time, it had made a fortune that was equivalent to hundreds of years of accumulation for the Moon Clan. Among those condemning sects, how many sects were actually secretly envious of the Moon Clan? Only the victors had the right to establish themselves in the cultivation world. Even if the losers didn't die, it would be difficult for them to establish themselves. This was the reality of the cultivation world. The incessant condemnation stopped abruptly after a piece of news came out. It was said that this time, the 10,000 demons and the Moon Clan had joined forces to destroy the Origin Immortal sect because Yu Qianqiu had taken revenge for Ong Guangsung's former master. The entanglement between them had been spread clearly. Perhaps even Hao Sansi himself did not expect that he, who was not famous in the cultivation world when he was alive, would become famous in the cultivation world more than 20 years after his death. Even the righteous sects, including the Fuxian Island, all remained silent. There were even some sects that had been condemning Yu Qianqiu before, but now they suddenly changed their tune and started to praise Yu Qianqiu for how he respected his master, how he endured humiliation to avenge his master, and how he was a role model for the disciples of other sections. As for the victim, the Origin Immortal sect, they were gradually described as greedy villains who killed for treasures. They deserved to be destroyed. In the world of cultivation, strength was always more useful than a glib tongue. History had proven that this was an irrefutable truth. The truth was always on the side of the victors. The Origin Immortal sect would be engraved on the pillar of humiliation, and Yu Qianqiu would be a good disciple who endured humiliation to avenge his master. The internal strife in the cultivation world of Wuxia made the sects nervous. They were worried that because of the internal strife, the Wuji Island would take the opportunity to attack. However, what surprised the Wuxia Cultivation Alliance was that the Wuji Island had been very quiet during this time. There wasn't even the slightest sign of provocation. They obediently played their part. This made people feel that they were worried about something or waiting for something. It gave people a feeling of silence before an explosion. In fact, Bai Changchun's reappearance in the cornucopia made the forces of the various countries behave a lot. The old man's terrifying skills made the Soul Formation Realm lords of the various countries unforgettable once again. It was better to wait until he went to the East Holy Land. Anyway, the day of the East Holy Land's opening was not far away. There was no need to provoke Bai Changchun at this time. The wind was bleak, the water was cold, and the warrior was gone, never to return. At the border of the west, war drums thundered and shook the heavens and bugles sounded. Millions of brave soldiers moved, war horses galloped, and the army began to gather in the clouds. The fierce west wind. Beside the tall platform, the commander's flag with the word "Sure" fluttered in the wind. On both sides of the platform, there were 3 large drums that looked like round tables. In front of each drum, there were 2 burly men with bare arms, waving sticks and beating the drums. The 6 drums vibrated at the same time, and the deafening sound pierced through the clouds. Generals quickly came to the front of the platform to receive their orders. On both sides of the platform there were 6 rows of generals and each row had 20 soldiers. All of them were clad in armor, their faces solemn and murderous. The 6 thunderous drums suddenly stopped, and the rumbling sound echoed in the air. Outside the gate surrounded by high fences, there was a hua-hua sound of armor. Shi Wenguang held a long sword at his waist, and walked in with a majestic gait. His armor shone brightly, and the bright red cloak behind him looked like it was dyed with blood. Behind him, there were 2 personal guards following closely behind him. However, there were 2 rows of 6 generals and a total of 12 generals accompanied him. Shirin Tian was impressively among them. A line of 15 people walked into the field in an orderly manner. After the 12 generals escorted Shi Wenguang to the platform, they scattered to both sides, and stood in front of the 12 rows of generals below the platform. Shi Wenguang held his sword and stood in the middle of the platform, looking down with a pair of fierce eyes. The generals who were qualified to stand under the platform were all famous generals of Wuxia who had followed him through hundreds of battles. Which one of them didn't climb out of a pile of corpses? But today, greetings, Grand Marshal. More than 100 generals shouted in unison, and their voices reverberated in all directions. All of them knelt down on one knee. Shi Wenguang swept his gaze around, and raised his hand to signal everyone to stand up. He then took a deep breath and shouted in a deep voice, "The Li dynasty is cruel and heartless. Corrupt officials run amok and prey on the common people. For the country and the people, we have fought bloody battles at the borders for many years, but in exchange we can't return to our homes. How many people have broken up their families? Although we are brave men, we also care about our country and the world. We hope that the common people can live in peace and prosperity. This is the duty of us iron-blooded soldiers. But we can't survive and we can't even protect our wives and children. Are we supposed to protect the Li dynasty where treacherous officials and corrupt officials gather? Are we supposed to be loyal to the Li dynasty's imperial power that makes the common people unable to live in peace? No, no, no." The generals and the surrounding soldiers raised their arms and shouted in unison, and their momentum was astonishing. "Although my family is reunited now, it's hard to erase the hatred in my heart that I've exchanged for a lifetime of military service. Hatred, hatred, hatred." Shi Wenguang cried out in pain. Then he said loudly, "Now I'm willing to repay the people's kindness of raising me with my hot-bloodedness, overthrow the Li dynasty's tyranny and return peace to the world. Are all of you willing to follow Shi Wenguang to conquer the world and make new contributions?" With a whoosh, the generals below the stage knelt down on one knee again. They cupped their hands together and shouted, "We're willing to follow the great marshal with our lives. We'll go through fire and water, and we'll do anything to overthrow the Li dynasty's tyranny and return peace to the world." "All right," Shi Wenguang shouted, "all generals listen up." Everyone immediately stood up and listened to the orders solemnly. Shi Wenguang's gaze swept past everyone and shouted again, "Yanping Wengao, where are you?" Two generals quickly walked out from the ranks and cupped their fists as they said in unison, "We're here." Unexpectedly, Shi Wenguang stared at them coldly from the stage. He waved his hand and said with a sneer, "Tie them up." The two generals were dumbfounded. Before they could react, they were immediately pressed to the ground by the ferocious soldiers who rushed out from both sides. Their helmets and swords were taken off and they were tied up. The generals on both sides stood silently and stared coldly at the two people tied up on the ground. No one pleaded for them as if they weren't surprised at all. "Why is the great marshal like this? Did I break any military rules?" The two of them struggled and shouted on the ground. Their faces were covered in dirt, and they were forced to kneel on the ground by the ferocious soldiers. "Why ask when you already know the answer?" Shi Wenguang stroked his beard and said indifferently with a cold gaze, "Although the two of you have followed me for many years, you're actually spies sent by the Li family to spy on me. In the past, I didn't touch you two because I wanted the Li family to be at ease. Now that the army is about to go on a punitive expedition against the Li family, how can I leave two spies by my side to ruin things? It just so happens that the army is about to go on a punitive expedition and needs human heads as sacrifices. I'll have to trouble the two of you." "Great Marshal, you're being wronged. Marshal, you're being wronged." The two of them struggled and cried out for their innocence. Unfortunately, Shi Wenguang didn't even care about them. Instead, he waved his arm and shouted, "Bring them in." There was a commotion outside the gate and hundreds of soldiers who were tied up were pushed in. Chapter 689. All of these people had stones stuffed into their mouths and had hemp ropes covering their mouths. None of them were able to speak. Their faces were filled with fear as they whimpered, as if they wanted to say something. However, Shi Wenguang had no intention of listening to what they had to say. All of them were forced to kneel on the ground. Other than the people who held them down, there was also a red-robed executioner with a demon-headed blade standing behind each of them. All the generals looked at these 500 people and knew what was going to happen next. However, none of them did anything. Not a single one of them came out to plead for mercy. This was because they knew that these 500 soldiers were the same as Yanping and Wengao. They were all spies planted by the imperial court within the army. It was just that their ranks were not as high as the two spies. Usually they were not touched because they did not want to alert the imperial court. But now that the army was about to move out, the Grand Marshal only needed to give the order to capture them all. Looking at this situation, Yanping and Wengao's face instantly became extremely pale. They understood everything. It seemed that their every move was already in the grasp of the Grand Marshal. Today was the day to capture them all. "Marshal, spare me." Yanping struggled to stand up and cried out to the tall and sturdy figure on the stage. Two soldiers raised their thick blades and smashed them on his calf. Kacha. The sound of bones breaking could be heard clearly. Yan Ping let out a painful groan and knelt down again. Wen Gao, who was also struggling, saw this scene and had a desolate expression on his face. He shouted towards the stage, "Marshal! Great General! This subordinate knows his mistake. I beg of you, Great General, for the sake of this subordinate's years of fighting and risking his life for you, please forgive this subordinate this time. This subordinate knows his mistake, Great General." The two soldiers who were holding him immediately swung the backs of their thick swords, directly striking his mouth. With two pa-pa sounds, blood mixed with broken teeth sprayed out. His mouth was immediately badly mutilated, and he could no longer speak loudly. Shi Wenguang held onto his sword and stared at the two of them in silence. After a long time he slowly said, "After the two of you die, bless my army from the underworld. Since the two of you have followed me into battle for so many years, when I conquer the world, I will treat your family well in the name of military martyrs who died in battle. Military law is merciless. The merciful do not command soldiers." Shirin Tian. Shirin Tian stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Here." Shi Wenguang gently waved his hand and said, "Send the two generals on their way for me." "Yes, sir." Shirin Tian threw off the white robe behind him, turned around and walked towards Yan Ping and Wen Gao, then took over the broadsword from the red-clothed executioner. Shi Wenguang stretched out his hand, and someone immediately handed him a red lot. Shi Wenguang picked up the red lot with 2 fingers and threw it off the stage. He shouted, "Sacrifice to the flag cut." Shirin Tian sends the 2 generals off. Shirin Tian bowed to Yan Ping and Wen Gao with his saber in his hand. He then walked in between the two and swung his saber left and right. Pu piu, sounds could be heard as 2 steaming heads fell to the ground. Shirin Tian's white robe was dyed red by the blood he spat out. Shirin Tian returned the blade back to the executioner and returned to his position. Soon after, more than 500 saber flashes could be seen. Pu piu, sounds could be heard as more than 500 heads fell to the ground. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere and the smell of blood filled the air. The generals had been fighting for many years and were used to seeing life and death. These 500 heads did not even have the qualifications to make them frown. In front of the plateau halfway up the mountain, Yu Qianqiu stood quietly under a large tree, calmly looking at the mountain deity temple at the foot of the mountain. The strong sunlight shone on his face, causing his expression to change unpredictably, as if his heart was not as calm as he looked on the surface. The Qin clan and Hong clan now included all the rogue cultivators in the entire Chinese cultivation world. Their members were spread all over China, making them the best place to gather information. Compared to the 100 Charms Enchantress Pink sect, they were much more flexible. Most importantly, these 2 clans were all under his command, and he could command them as he pleased. It was not like the time when he needed to gather information from the Pink sect. After knowing that Shi Wenguang's army was about to make a move, he had been sitting here, receiving all kinds of information from all over the world. Shi Wenguang could handle the war, so he didn't need to worry about it. What he paid attention to was the reaction of the various sects in the cultivation world when Shi Wenguang's army made a move. To him, there were 2 battlefields in China. The secular world was Shi Wenguang's and the Li dynasty's battlefield. On the other hand, his battlefield was the cultivation world. He didn't allow any sects in the cultivation world to intervene in the secular world's war. Once he found any abnormal signs, he would do his best to put an end to it. Even Fuxian Island couldn't. After struggling, working hard, and going crazy in the cultivation world, he already had enough confidence to make the so-called world's #1 sect, Fuxian Island, shrink back. A figure flashed and landed on the plateau in front of the room. Gu Qingyun strode to the back of Yu Qianqiu, and Yu Qianqiu asked without turning his head, "Is there any new news?" Shi Wenguang's 1,000,000-strong army has already made a move. Before Gu Qingyun could finish, Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and looked at him asking, "How's the situation?" Hong Gang and Qin Gang are paying close attention to the movement. Currently, the various sects in the cultivation world have no reaction, and they seem to be waiting for Fuxian Island's reaction. The strange thing is that Wuxia Empire is Fuxian Island's exclusive property. Shi Wenguang revolted, but Fuxian Island has no reaction. "It's a little hard to understand," Gu Qingyun said with a puzzled expression. "There's nothing strange about it. I've already warned Fuxian Island, so they won't dare to act rashly for now." Yu Qianqiu casually said and asked, "How's the situation over at Shi Wenguang's side?" Gu Qingyun was a little surprised as he didn't expect him to even dare to warn Fuxian Island. He then said with a smile, "This person is really good at fighting and his subordinates are all peerless generals who have been through hundreds of battles. In addition to the million-strong elite under him, the imperial court's troops are no match for him. I reckon the Li dynasty is already restless. Yu Qianqiu said with an "oh," and asked with a smile, "What's the situation?" Gu Qingyun explained, "The Huaxia Empire has 6 million troops, and the Zhou State, Wei State and Ping State generals are in charge of one division each. Each division has about 2 million troops." In reality, the movement of Shi Wenguang's army had already alerted the imperial court, and they had already ordered the Wei State general in the east to personally lead his army to defend. The Wei State general, on the other hand, did a good job. He led 1.2 million troops, and once he arrived at the west, he sent out 300,000 troops to guard the Black Wind Gap stronghold. This place is easy to defend and hard to attack, so he thought it would be foolproof. Who knew that Shi Wenguang had already secretly sent out 50,000 elite troops before he sent out his army? They went through untold hardships and crossed the mountains to lie in ambush behind the stronghold. Once the army neared the Black Wind Gap, Shi Wenguang sent his son Shi Tian to lead 100,000 troops to attack. They worked together with the 50,000 elite troops that infiltrated the stronghold. In less than a day, they took down the Black Wind Gap and opened up the path to the Central Plains. The people he picked didn't disappoint him, so Yu Qianqiu was more or less relieved. He said with a smile, "All's fair in war, as expected of the famous great General Shi. I didn't expect Shi Tian to be the one who made the greatest contribution." Gu Qingyun nodded and continued. After Shi Wenguang took down the Black Wind Gap, he ordered 3 generals to lead 300,000 vanguard troops to attack the main force of the Wei State general from 3 different directions. The remaining 900,000 troops of the Wei State general were utterly defeated, and the Wei State general was no longer in the mood to fight, so he fled in panic. After that, Shi Wenguang's 3 vanguard troops advanced with irresistible force. In just a short 10 days they took down 3 residences and 18 cities in the west, completely clearing away all the obstacles in their way to the Central Plains. The next step is to fight the vast land of the Central Plains. The wealth, population and food of the Huaxia Empire will all leave the Central Plains. It would be strange if the Li dynasty is not anxious. Yu Qianqiu laughed heartily. Amidst his happiness he frowned and muttered, "Shi Wenguang's offensive is ferocious. I'm afraid it will force some people to take desperate measures. You and Hong Qi must keep a close eye on the movements of the sections. If there's anything wrong, tell me immediately so that I can deal with it." The news of Shi Wenguang's rebellion spread throughout the entire Huaxia Empire in no time. The whole of Huaxia was in a state of shock. And within the borders of the whole country, the imperial court began to forcefully recruit a large number of able-bodied men to serve in order to block Shi Wenguang's attack. In fact, this was also a last resort. The imperial court would never have thought that the Wei State general, who was equally as famous as the pillar of the state general, could not even withstand the attack of the former for a month. 1.2 million troops. They were defeated just like that. What else could they do but recruit able-bodied men? From the capital of Huaxia to the rest of the country, all the high-ranking officials and nobles began to panic. This was because these people with vested interests were originally attached to the current regime, absorbing the wealth of the people. Once the regime was overthrown, their good days would come to an end. Not to mention good days, whether or not they would be able to keep their lives in the future was still a problem. It was not like Yu Qianqiu's previous world, where once they were full of money, they could easily escape to a foreign country due to special circumstances and continue to live a carefree life. Also, due to some special reasons, no one would really pursue and punish them. So, who cares if your country is good or bad? What can they do to me? What does it have to do with me? Although these people usually lived a luxurious life, they were not as stupid as the pigs in the pigsty. They knew more than the common people. It was fine if the Huaxia Empire's army was used to bully and extort unarmed people. But if they wanted to fight against Shi Wenguang's army, which had been fighting bloody battles at the borders for years, that was a joke. It was no different from courting death. For a moment, everyone panicked. In the heavily guarded palace in the capital of Huaxia, His Majesty flew into a rage during the court meeting, scolding the Wei State general for being an idiot. However, throwing a tantrum was one thing, but he still had to think of a solution. Thus he pointed to the Ping State general. As for the Ping State general, he used the excuse that he and his men had to protect the important areas of the capital region, so it was not convenient for him to move out easily. In the end, the flustered and exasperated His Majesty flung his sleeves and left. Then he found the current imperial preceptor and asked the power behind the Li dynasty for help. Chapter 690. They finally made a move. Feng Xiangtian sighed helplessly. The state preceptor of the Wuxia Empire, who was also a disciple of supporting Xian Island, came back to ask for help. In fact, there was no need for him to come back to report. Supporting Xian Island already knew about Shi Wenguang's rebellion. Since Yu Qianzhou said it himself, supporting Xian Island had sent people to secretly monitor it. The so-called secret surveillance was to secretly find an opportunity to assassinate Shi Wenguang and his son. As long as they did it secretly, even if Yu Qianzhou came looking for supporting Immortal Island, supporting Immortal Island could just push the matter aside and say that they didn't do it and that someone might have deliberately framed them to sow discord. Don't think that the world's #1 sect wouldn't do shady things. With the support of strength, shady things would be even more secretive. However, the people they sent reported that Shi Wenguang had many crossing tribulation experts protecting him. The strangest thing was that these crossing tribulation experts were unfamiliar faces. They had never seen them in the Wuxia cultivation world. The higher-ups of Fuxian Island immediately thought of a possibility, which was that Yu Qianzhou had borrowed manpower from another nation's forces. It should be known that the other countries had a lord overseeing them. The lord who could control a territory was basically at the spirit-severing intermediate stage. This wasn't something that supporting Xian Island dared to act recklessly. The spirit-severing experts hadn't come yet. If they attracted them, it would be too late. Thus the assassins were called back. Inside the house, a group of elders of supporting Xian Island gathered. Guan Weiwu lowered his head and didn't say anything. The others glanced at Fernan from time to time. Fernan's current situation in supporting Xian Island was very delicate. Perhaps it was more appropriate to describe it as awkward. If it wasn't for Ma Jiugu's protection, he would have lost his position. We shouldn't have expelled Yu Qianzhou from the sect. At that time he had already displayed outstanding cultivation talent. But what did we do? We are ashamed to face the ancestors of the supporting Immortal Island. Elder Mo of the Equipment Refining Pavilion, who was sitting beside Ferdinand, grumbled softly. Feng Xiangtian glared at him coldly. If he was to be held accountable for expelling Yu Qianzhou from the sect, he, as the sect leader, would have to bear the blame because he was the one who insisted on expelling Yu Qianzhou from the sect. The reason was naturally because Yu Qianzhou, a mere disciple, dared to challenge the prestige of a sect leader like him. Elder Mo's grumbling was no different from blaming him, the sect master. The Cultivation Pavilion's principal elder, O Sihai, immediately shouted, "We are discussing how to deal with this matter, not letting you fart overnight." He came out to smooth things over. Then he looked around and said, "This Yu Qianzhou first gathered the 10,000 demons and the Moon Clan to wipe out the Daluo sect. Now he wants to take over the throne in the secular world. What is he trying to do?" No one could answer this question. There was a short silence in the room. After a while, Dongfang Chang'eo said slowly, "I heard that Yu Qianzhou killed Luo Guang and 13 other masters in the final phase of the tribulation passing stage in the Daluo sect. I don't know if it is true or not." O Sihai's face twitched and he said in a low voice, "Since he can be called the #1 master below the soul formation stage by the masters in the final phase of the soul formation stage, he must have the ability to do so." Then he asked Feng Xiangtian, "Sect leader, what do the Tianxin Pavilion's masters think?" Feng Xiangtian shook his head slightly and said, "What they mean is that they have no opinion on any decision we make. In fact, what Guan Dinghai meant was that if there was no other way they could only bear with it for now and give up this fat piece of meat in the secular world." Although the consecrators had this intention, he couldn't tell the others that the consecrators had also given in. This would damage the dignity of the consecrators. Everyone looked at each other and didn't say it out loud. They already knew what the masters meant. In the end it was O Sihai who said, "I think it's fine to give up the imperial power in the secular world. Just take it as a stopgap measure. If there is a chance in the future we can take it back. What do you think?" It wasn't good to let the old masters take the blame, and it wasn't good to let the sect leader take the blame. As an elder of the Cultivation Pavilion, his weight was lower than the other two but higher than the others. He was the best candidate to take the blame. This was called knowing one's own limits. Everyone shook their heads and expressed that they had no opinion. Feng Xiangtian heaved a sigh of relief and sighed. "Since it is everyone's decision, then let it be. There is no need to send the imperial advisor to the Li dynasty. Bear with it for now and don't have any conflict with Yu Qianzhou. Everyone is dismissed. Go do your own things." The news of Yu Qianzhou wiping out the Daluo sect not only spread throughout the Wuxia cultivation world, but also to the various countries. The cultivators of the various countries didn't care about it since it had nothing to do with them. However, they felt that it was in line with that butcher's style. TSK. Wiping out nearly 20,000 disciples, a butcher is a butcher. In the Spirit Fang Valley, in Lu Yanqing's personal alchemy room in the medicine hut, the Allure Beauty and Yen Yu were helping Lu Yanqing organize the various spiritual herbs. Lu Yanqing stood at the side with a solemn expression and looked at the two busy women. Suddenly she said, "I have some news about Yu Qianshou in the Wuxia cultivation world. Do you want to hear it?" The two women were stunned. After looking at each other, they nodded slightly, indicating that they wanted to hear it. Lu Yanqing immediately frowned and told the two about Yu Qianshou wiping out the Daluo sect. Yen Yu was shocked. She didn't expect Yu Qianshou to kill so many people. The Allure Beauty was in a daze for a long time. Her eyes gradually became moist. He had finally avenged her and accomplished what she wanted to do but couldn't. In the bamboo forest of Utopia, Yu Qianshou quietly appeared in the courtyard. Just as he walked around, he suddenly heard someone ask in the bamboo house, "Who is it? Someone lives here?" Yu Qianshou was stunned, but when he saw Shui Qingkong walking out of the house, he suddenly realized that he had almost forgotten that Bai Suzhen's uncle was still here. So he smiled and cupped his hands, saying, "Senior Shui, are you used to living here?" "So it's the leader." Shui Qingkong quickly bowed. He had stayed in Utopia for a long time, so he naturally knew Yu Qianshou's position in Utopia. After standing up, he replied, "It's very quiet here. It's a good place to live. I should thank the leader for taking me in. May I know what instructions the leader has for coming here?" Yu Qianshou pointed behind and said, "Nothing much. Go to the grave at the back and pay your respects." Shui Qingkong was slightly surprised. He hadn't come to pay his respects for so many years. Why did he suddenly come today? There must be a special reason. Thus he cupped his hands and said, "Then I'll go out and take a walk. Please help yourself, leader." Yu Qianshou smiled and nodded, watching him leave. Then he looked around the quiet bamboo forest and could not help but feel a little emotional. The bamboo forest and bamboo houses here were built by him and by Suzhen. Back then, there were only the two of them in the whole of Utopia. After reminiscing for a while, he stepped on the thick bamboo leaves and walked to the back of the bamboo house. The back of the bamboo house was empty, and a grave stood there conspicuously. The surroundings were very clean, and there were new marks on the grave. There was not even a single weed. Clearly someone had cleaned it often. Yu Qianshou walked to the front of the tombstone, slowly knelt down and kowtowed 3 times. Then he sat on the ground and leaned against the tombstone with a smile, saying, "Old man, I haven't come to see you for a long time. Don't be angry. It's not that I forgot or didn't want to see you, but that I didn't avenge you, so I don't have the face to see you. Today I'm here to tell you good news. The Daluo sect was destroyed by me and I killed the person who killed you. Although it took me more than 20 years to avenge you, I finally avenged you, right? Don't nag at me anymore." He raised his hand and took out a head from his storage bag. He raised it and shook it. "Old man, do you see this? This is Zhu Xianxian who killed you. I brought his head. Originally, I wanted to use it as a memorial to you, but I think you don't want to see this face, so I might as well just throw it away and save you the trouble." As he spoke, a green flame appeared in his palm, instantly burning the head to ashes. He took out a wine flask, opened the lid and placed it on the ground. Clear wine flowed out, and the fragrance of wine wafted in the surroundings. "Old man, it's been a long time since I drank with you." Yu Qianshou also took out a jar of wine and drank it heartily. He leaned against the tombstone and kept muttering to himself, recounting his experiences over the years to the person who had died many years ago. "Old man, I haven't drunk with you for a long time." Yu Qianshou also took out a jar of wine and drank it to his heart's content. He leaned against the tombstone and kept muttering to himself, recounting his experiences over the years to the person who had died many years ago. He recounted all the ups and downs he had experienced over the years. He even grumbled about the grievances that outsiders couldn't see, as if he was a child complaining to an adult. Leaning against the tombstone, his expression alternated between excitement, depression, pride, and sobbing. He seemed deranged like a shameless madman. Towards the end he actually started crying. He hugged the wine jar and drank the wine, crying bitterly. His face was covered with water and it was hard to tell if it was wine or tears. He was still drinking the wine and it was a very strong kind of wine. If outsiders were to see this, who would believe that this was the scum of the cultivation world who did all kinds of evil? Who would believe that this was the butcher of the cultivation world who killed people like flies? As the smell of wine filled the air, a bright moon rose above the bamboo forest. He was still muttering weakly. A graceful white figure gently walked over. Under the illumination of the moonlight, Bai Suzhen's gentle and peerless face revealed a pitiful expression as she silently looked at him. Shui Qingkong only came back after dark. She thought that Yu Qianqiu must have left, but when she came back she heard him crying bitterly behind her. She was shocked and immediately went to the Misty Palace to inform Bai Suzhen. That was why Bai Suzhen appeared here. In a daze, Yu Qianqiu vaguely saw a white-robed person standing in the moonlight. He struggled to open his eyes, and when he saw that it was Bai Suzhen, he immediately woke up. He picked up the wine jar and looked at it. He muttered, "Damn it. It's not easy being a cultivator. I've drunk so much but I can't even get drunk." In the blink of an eye, he returned to his playful and angry self. Chapter 691. The hint of pity on Bai Suzhen's face also disappeared the moment he stood up. A gentle smile appeared on her face as she asked softly, "Why did you come here alone?" "Let me hug you first, then I will tell you." Yu Qianqiu revealed a sinister smile. Bai Suzhen pointed at his wet body and shook her head with a faint smile. Then, she gently opened her arms and took the initiative to hug him. Yu Qianqiu laughed and pulled her into his arms. He buried his head in her soft neck and enjoyed a deep breath, inhaling the faint fragrance of her body into his lungs. He murmured, "It's so comfortable. Your chest is also very elastic. I will find a chance to peel it off and see." Bai Suzhen also hugged him gently, allowing him to say frivolous words without saying anything. In the bamboo forest under the moonlight, the two tightly hugged each other as if they never wanted to be separated. The only inharmonious scene was the lonely grave on the side. After a long time, Yu Qianqiu was so comfortable that he almost fell asleep standing up. Suddenly, he heard Bai Suzhen ask softly in his ear, "Have you come to pay respects to your master?" "Yes." Yu Qianqiu was too lazy to reply at this time, so he softly answered through his nose. "Have you avenged your master?" Bai Suzhen asked. "Yes." Yu Qianqiu buried his head in her neck, still motionless. "Killed many people?" Bai Suzhen asked hesitantly. Yu Qianqiu raised his head and pushed her away. He looked at her face and asked curiously, "How do you know?" Bai Suzhen smiled sweetly and her eyes flashed. She wanted to say that she guessed it from his actions in front of Hao Sanxi's grave, but she changed her words and said in a low voice, "I remember that there are many people in the Daluo sect. If you really took revenge you must have killed many people." Yu Qianqiu said in his heart, "Bosom friend." He shrugged his shoulders indifferently and pulled her hand, "Let's go for a walk." Bai Suzhen gently pulled him back and shook her head. "It's rare for you to come back. You should go and accompany Chu Pinger." Yu Qianqiu glanced at her and let go of her hand. He took out a jar of wine and popped a small hole near the bottom. The sparkling wine flowed out in a thin stream. He walked to the front of the grave and placed the jug of wine on the tombstone. He chuckled and said, "Old man, I won't accompany you anymore. Drink slowly." The wine flowed down the tombstone. Then, without saying anything, he walked to Bai Suzhen's side and forcefully dragged her away. They walked hand in hand through the bamboo forest and slowly walked forward. They didn't know how long they had walked, but they didn't say a word. After they walked to the lake, they sat down on the grass by the lake. Yu Qianqiu lay down lazily with his head on Bai Suzhen's thigh and looked at the stars in the sky. He didn't know when he took a bite of grass and chewed it. Seeing that he was chewing grass so happily, Bai Suzhen thought of cows eating grass. So she kept pulling out grass and piling it on his stomach until he looked like a big belly woman. She couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. She was playful and kept burying him with grass. Yu Qianqiu was distracted and didn't notice that he was covered with grass. He looked at the countless twinkling stars in the sky, but his mind was thinking about his women. Finally he thought of Yanyu and was slightly startled. He wondered how she and the Enchantress of 100 Charms were doing in the Lingfang Valley. Bai Suzhen also noticed his abnormality and finally asked, "What's wrong?" Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses and immediately found that he was covered with grass. He rolled his eyes and said, "Beauty, are you afraid of being discovered by others, so you want to destroy my body to destroy the evidence?" He reached out his hand to tickle Bai Suzhen's armpit. Bai Suzhen twisted her body and giggled like a silver bell. "No, no." Yu Qianqiu let her go, but he pointed to his face and said with a sinister smile, "Murdering an adulterer is a heinous crime. I punish you by kissing me." "What an unreasonable punishment. Let me think about whether I should execute it or not." Bai Suzhen tilted her head and thought for a while. Then she gently lowered her head and slowly pressed her soft red lips on Yu Qianqiu's forehead. She stayed for a while before leaving. Yu Qianqiu smiled proudly and sat up. He said, "I'm leaving. Don't tell others that I've been back." Bai Suzhen looked at him quietly for a while and nodded slightly. Yu Qianqiu let out a self-deprecating laugh, hugged Bai Suzhen's face, and gave her a kiss before vanishing. Bai Suzhen sat alone by the lake for a long time. She looked at the moon in the sky with a gentle smile from time to time and kept fiddling with the pile of grass. Finally, she picked up a pile of grass and sprinkled it all over the sky. Then she slowly rose into the sky and flew through the drifting grass, like Chang'e flying to the moon, towards the misty palace high up in the sky. Shuntian Island under the moonlight had a unique charm. The moonlight and starlight were also reflected in the boundless lake, which made people mistakenly think that Shuntian Island was floating in the vast sea of stars. It was a beautiful sight. Furong and Ziyi would never get tired of looking at this beautiful scenery. The two girls foolishly laid on the grass by the lake and counted the stars. However, they messed up their count, so they started over again. Their behavior was similar to someone's behavior in a faraway place. On the roof, Bai Changchun stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at the stars in the distance. Nongzhu sat comfortably on the side and said, "Old Bai, you're finally back. I thought you were really going to stay in front of the 9th Netherworld cave. Of all the things you like, why do you like to fight?" Bai Changchun slowly replied, "I've already told the Ghost King outside the 9th Netherworld cave that if there are more people from the underworld coming out from the 9th Netherworld cave, just lead them here. I'll be there anytime." "You're crazy." Nongzhu suddenly stood up. She couldn't be comfortable anymore. She looked around with some lingering fear and said, "You're crazy, you're not afraid. But we can't be compared to you. What if the masters from the underworld suddenly come? Won't we be in trouble?" "Don't worry. As long as someone from the underworld comes out, I'll know in advance. You can also leave in advance." Bai Changchun looked away from the distant starry sky and fell on Furong, who was counting the stars by the lake. He said quietly, "When you leave, remember to take Furong with you to your purple bamboo forest." Hearing the first part of his words, Nongzhu was just relieved. But when she heard the second part, her heart tightened again. She asked suspiciously, "Old Bai, tell me honestly, if there are some top masters from the underworld, are you sure you can defeat them?" Bai Changchun nodded calmly and said, "Yes, I'm not sure. After all, we haven't seen how strong the real masters from the underworld are. But I'm still eager for a fight. The stronger the opponent, the better. It's best if he can force me into a desperate situation. I've been exploring another way of cultivation by myself without any reference. I want to improve my strength, but I don't know where to start. Only when I meet someone stronger than me, the stronger the better. Only when I experience a fight like that with all my strength, I believe I can find a way to improve my strength by leaps and bounds and break through the realm that I've been wanting to touch." Nongzhu was dumbfounded. She swallowed hard and said, "Your cultivation has reached this level, and there's still a chance to improve by leaps and bounds? Then, what kind of realm is that?" "The Tao. The Tao." Bai Changchun murmured, "The Tao, can be Tao, is not the Tao." Nongzhu was confused and said with confusion, "What Tao can be Tao and is not the Tao? Old Bai, what are you talking about?" If Yu Qianqiu had heard this, he would have doubted whether Bai Changchun was also a time traveler. The Tao can be Tao but is not the Tao? Isn't it from the Tao Te Ching? Although he couldn't recite the whole Tao Te Ching, he could casually say the first few sentences. Bai Changchun shook his head slowly and said, "I don't know myself. I only feel that I've touched something but I can't understand it clearly. So I need to fight with all my strength. Maybe the enlightenment is only at the moment of the battle. My self-enlightenment cultivation method is different from yours. Once I have an epiphany, my cultivation will reach another realm in a flash." Compared with the previous realm, it's not too much to describe it as like the clouds and mud. Ah. Nongzhu's mouth was wide open. He even doubted whether he had heard it wrong. Bai Changchun's current cultivation was already terrifying enough. Once he broke through to a new realm, the original horrifying cultivation would be like the mud, while the new realm would be as noble as the clouds. One was in the sky while the other was on the ground. Was there such a huge difference in cultivation? "Old Bai, are you kidding?" Although Nongzhu knew that Bai Changchun wouldn't lie, he still couldn't help asking. Bai Changchun didn't pay any more attention to him. He stared at the night sky and murmured to himself, "Maybe the new realm can make me reborn and rebuild my body." Nongzhu was completely dumbfounded. He looked at Bai Changchun as if he was a monster. Yu Qianqiu suddenly appeared in a hidden call not far from the spirit-fragrant valley. He floated to the top of a large tree at the top of the mountain and looked around. His gaze locked onto a valley with flickering lights. Those lights were not real lights, but the fluorescent stones that were commonly used by cultivators. Obviously, that valley was Lingfang Valley. It was impossible for ordinary people to use fluorescent stones, which were only used by cultivators, in such a deep mountain. The basis of this judgment was a silver ball that was set up by the scouts in Lingfang Valley. He came here to see how the Temptress and Yan Yu were doing in Lingfang Valley. The most important reason was that he himself didn't know why, but he wanted to tell the 100 Charms Enchantress that he had already avenged his master Hao Sansi. However, he didn't know that the Temptress already knew about this. In fact, the two of them had the silver ball that he gave them when they parted at Cornucopia. The two of them didn't know the use of this silver ball. In fact, it was given by Yu Qianqiu to make it easier for him to find them. He didn't want to tell them that it was for this reason, so the two of them mistook it as a commemorative item. He had found their location in Utopia, so he could easily appear beside them. However, there were two soul formation experts here, and he was afraid that it would cause some misunderstanding if he appeared too abruptly. After all, it wasn't a good thing to barge into someone's sleeping place in the middle of the night, especially when there was the world's most beautiful woman around. To be honest, ever since Lu Yanqing ruined his plans at Cornucopia, he didn't like this self-proclaimed world's most beautiful woman. Using her beauty as capital to ruin other people's plans, what a problem. If you have the ability, show me your true abilities, then I'll be convinced. Chapter 692. His idea was to fly slowly from a distance. With the cultivation of the two spirit-severing experts, it would not be difficult for them to find him. When they met, he would explain his purpose of coming and naturally, there would not be any misunderstanding. Just as he was about to fly towards Lingfang Valley, he suddenly saw a shadow flashing in the light. Yu Qianqiu subconsciously hid in the branches and leaves under his feet. Usually, it was easy to see things clearly in the light from the dark, but it was difficult to see things clearly in the dark from the light. As soon as Yu Qianqiu hid himself, he regretted it. He had been too careful. He had intended to come here openly. If he had been discovered by others while hiding, it would have been strange if others did not think that he had bad intentions. Yu Qianqiu wanted to show himself, but he found that the shadow was flying towards him. So, he decided to hide quietly and held his breath, waiting for the person to leave. He believed that as long as he did not move, it would be difficult for others to find him. The person who flew over did not leave, but landed on the tree where Yu Qianqiu was hiding. It was probably because the tree was too conspicuous. Yu Qianqiu looked up and saw the person above. He suddenly felt relieved. It was none other than his old friend, Third Xn. This old man was in a good mood. He came out to see the scenery so late at night. He really did not have a normal brain. Yu Qianqiu looked at Third Xn who was looking around. He was secretly happy and was about to scare him, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Look at this old man, why does he feel a little sneaky? What is this old man trying to do? Is he going to have an affair in the middle of the night? Yu Qianqiu's face revealed a lewd smile. He was just thinking about it. Based on his understanding of Third Xin's forthright character, he would not have an affair. He would only meet his lover openly. Third brother Xin, who was on the treetop, had already flown to the call where he jumped out from. He pushed aside a pile of wormwood and carried out two women. He held one in each of his arms and once again looked around furtively. Then he quickly sneaked into the depths of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu hid in the bushes with a dumbfounded expression. He blinked his eyes in disbelief, thinking that his eyes were playing tricks on him. But with the bright moon in the sky, he was sure that third brother Xn had carried out two women, and they were two young girls. One of them was even wearing a typical white dress. There was no mistaking it. Sure enough, it's hard to know a person's heart. You may know a person's face, but you don't know his heart. What did it mean to appear loyal but have a treacherous heart? That was exactly what this old fellow was talking about. He actually dared to challenge two people in the wilderness. Motherf *Ker, he has character. I have to go and admire him and catch him in the act. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands excitedly. He winked and grinned evilly as he dashed out in the direction that third brother Xn had gone. He was afraid of startling third brother Xn, so he was very careful along the way. Along the way he changed into a pure black knight suit. But he found out that third brother Xn was even more careful than him. Third brother Xn would often stop and hide in the dark, watching for any movement. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu was not just a normal kind of sinister in this aspect. When he sensed that something was wrong, he stopped and hid like an experienced spy. The two of them acted like spies. Under the moonlight, the terrain was hazy and twisted, undulating. It was difficult for people who were not familiar with the terrain to move freely. Even though he was experienced in sneaking around, he still almost lost third brother Xian a few times. If it wasn't for the fact that third brother Xian's speed was not very fast, it would have been difficult to keep up with him. After all, there was still a gap between their cultivation levels. Most importantly, the woman third brother Xian was carrying was wearing a white dress, which was very eye-catching under the moonlight. That was why he did not lose third brother Xian. Both of them sneaked into the vast mountains. The more Yu Qianqiu followed, the more he felt that something was wrong. His expression became serious. Even if third brother Xian was having an affair, there was no need for him to go so far. He was too careful. Was there a need to go so far into such a remote place? Now it didn't seem like an affair but more like destroying the corpses. With this suspicion, he immediately remembered that the two girls seemed to be unconscious. He did not know if they were dead or alive. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and followed even more carefully. He smelled a trace of conspiracy. Another half an hour later, Yu Qianqiu, who was following closely behind, saw third brother Xian bring the two girls into a valley without hesitation. His heart immediately moved, and his intuition told him that they had arrived at their destination. He carefully sneaked into the dense forest and hid behind a tree where he could roughly see the situation in the valley. Under the moonlight, he could see 70 to 80% of the situation in the valley. It was a triangular valley sandwiched by 3 mountains. There was a stream flowing in the valley. Looking at the pebbles in the valley, it was obvious that it was the dry season of the stream. When the water was full, it could cover the entire bottom of the valley. Because of this, the valley looked very clean, not even weeds could be seen. The pebbles at the bottom of the valley were flat and gray under the moonlight. The two girls that third brother Xian brought with him were lying on the ground. Where did third brother Xian go? Yu Qianqiu looked around suspiciously. He should have known that she was not a good person. He was so annoyed that he wanted to vomit blood. He sent the Enchantress of 100 Charms and Yan Yu to Spirit Fang Valley. Isn't this sending them to a wolf's den? Yan Zhuixing slowly walked to the side of the 8 women on the ground. After looking at them, he nodded slightly and said, "You 4 brothers did a good job. When you came, you were not discovered by anyone, right?" "No." The 4 of them bowed together and replied. So these 4 guys were brothers. Sure enough, they were related to Lu Yanqing. Otherwise, how could Yan Zhuixing instruct her 4 disciples? The most poisonous woman's heart. As Yu Qianqiu was gnashing his teeth in hatred, he suddenly saw Yan Zhuixing give the 4 people a look. Yu Qianqiu was on alert. The water under his neck spread up and wrapped his head. He sank into the water and stuck close to the bottom of the stone. The 3 Xian brothers quickly flew to the mountains on 3 sides. They used their eyes and divine sense to scan the area. After confirming that there was nothing suspicious, they returned to report that everything was fine. And Yu Qianqiu quietly emerged from the bottom of the water. Not a drop of water could be seen on his head. His body was in the water but not a drop of water could be seen. This could be considered as a magical thing about cultivating water arts. Yan Zhuixing instructed the 4 of them to position the 7 basins on the ground, while he shot a beam of black light at 7 of the 8 girls. The 7 girls woke up one after another, but when they saw the surrounding scene, they could not help but scream in fear. As a result, Yan Zhuixing's eyes suddenly flashed with red light. In an instant, the 7 girls' minds were captured. The 7 girls immediately stood up in a daze. They looked at Yan Zhuixing and began to take off their clothes with a silly smile. After a while, 7 exquisite white and tender bodies appeared under the bright moonlight. F** King Red-Eye Disease bastard. Yu Qianqiu cursed with a twisted expression. He had experienced Yan Zhuixing's pair of red demon eyes, so he naturally knew its power. But what made him unbearable was that these girls were actually mortals. They were not people of the cultivation world at all. This bastard actually used demonic techniques on mortals and used such despicable means to desecrate mortals. At the same time, what puzzled Yu Qianqiu was that he found that Yan Zhuixing's cultivation was similar to his in the cornucopia, but now he could not see through it. Obviously, Yan Zhuixing's cultivation had broken through again. Such a godly cultivation speed, coupled with his vicious thoughts and methods, and most importantly, this person was opposing him so he absolutely could not be allowed to live. Go. Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed as he sized up the situation. He had already made preparations to launch a sneak attack. Chapter 693. Yan Zhuixing looked up at the night sky and didn't know what he was looking at. Then he walked to the middle of the 7 stone basins. The 3 brothers of Xen Laosan swept in 4 directions and stood still. At the same time they looked around vigilantly as if they were guarding. The 7 naked girls walked towards the 7 arranged basins without feeling anything. One of them stepped into a stone basin, sat down and lay on their side in the basin. Half of the basin was empty, and the other half was full of people. It felt a bit like the Taiji painting. The 7 basins were like plates with good dishes, and the girls inside were the dishes on the plates. Yu Qianqiu looked confused. He didn't know what Yan Zhuixing wanted to do. Under the starry sky this scene looked like some kind of sacrifice. Did this jealous person want to sacrifice living people? After the 7 girls lay in the stone basin, Yan Zhuixing walked to a basin and took out a pot of 7-star blood orchid from the storage bag. He inserted one hand directly into the flower pot and dug out the blood orchid together with the soil. He carefully placed the empty flower pot outside the pot. Then he took out 6 pots of blood orchid and put them into the remaining 6 stone basins in the same way. When Yu Qianqiu saw the 7 pots of blood orchid, he was so angry that his teeth itched. Obviously they were the 7 blood orchids that were bought from him. Although these 7 pots of blood orchid had grown very luxuriant, he was sure that they were his. The only thing that made him feel strange was that the flowers of the 7-star blood orchid were all white. Why were these 7 black flowers? He secretly pondered in his heart. It must be this jealous person who used some evil magic. Yan Zhuixing then sat cross-legged in the middle of the arranged stone basin. He looked straight ahead with cold eyes, and his body began to emit bursts of black mist. The black mist gradually spread and became thicker and thicker. It slowly enveloped the area within a radius of 10 meters. Yan Zhuixing's movement couldn't be seen at all. It was much thicker than the black mist released from his body before. Obviously, his demonic skills had made a lot of progress. A rolling black mist suddenly appeared in the valley under the starry sky. This scene looked a little strange, and an abnormal aura spread in all directions. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the water, couldn't help it. Now was a good opportunity. It was a good time to take advantage of the black mist to launch a sneak attack. But in the end he still endured it. He wanted to see what this jealous person was doing. Maybe he could figure out what Lingfang Valley was conspiring with this guy. Suddenly, 7 spots of red light appeared in the black mist, shining and swimming in it. At the same time, the black mist tumbled rapidly and quickly retracted. Yan Zhuixing's seated figure appeared once again. In the blink of an eye, the black mist condensed into 7 balls. The 7 balls tumbled and gradually took shape, forming 7 seemingly solid black snakes. They were black flying snakes. The snake's head flashed and danced around Yan Zhuixing. Yu Qianqiu had never seen such a strange scene before. Just as he was secretly alarmed, he suddenly saw Yan Zhuixing sit still and say, "Go." The 7 black flying snakes bent their bodies and shot into the 7 stone basins with a whoosh, like arrows being shot from a crossbow. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the river, could see the blood splashing out from the 7 basins. His eyes immediately widened and his muscles tightened. He knew that the 7 girls were probably done for. He regretted not making a move earlier, but it was too late now. In order to find out, he bit his lips and resisted the urge to rush out. Because he was not only dealing with Yan Zhuixing, but also Lingfang Valley, who was known for their good reputation. Know yourself and know your enemy and you will never be defeated. He could only comfort himself and suppress the boiling killing intent in his chest. Yu Qianqiu was in a lower position, so he couldn't see what was happening in the basins. 7 bloody holes had appeared on the hearts of the 7 girls in the basins. Blood gushed into the stone basins like a fountain. More and more blood gathered in the basins, and the 7 girls became paler and paler. Their eyes slowly closed and they fell asleep in their own pools of blood, never to open their eyes again. The roots of the 7-star blood orchid were soaked in the blood. It was as if they had absorbed the vitality of the girls and became more beautiful. The 7-star blood orchid had a miraculous effect. The sunflower could automatically correspond to the sun in the sky during the day, and the 7-star blood orchid could automatically correspond to the Big Dipper in the sky at night. In addition, its color was as bright as blood, and the smell it emitted was also the smell of blood, so it was called the 7-star blood orchid. Yu Qianqiu also knew the origin of the 7-star blood orchid's name. However, at this moment, the 7 7-star blood orchids in the stone basins were showing a miraculous scene. Bathed in the starry sky, the 7 small black flowers were moving slowly, corresponding to the Big Dipper in the night sky. On the hearts of the 7 girls who had died, the black flying snake drilled out of the bloody hole. It wandered in the pool of blood and slowly climbed to the edge of the stone basins. It just happened to circle around with its head and tail facing each other. It raised its head and hissed as if it was waiting for something. Yan Zhuoxing, who was sitting quietly, suddenly raised his arms and made a messy and complicated gesture. He shot 7 black lights into the 7 blood orchids, and then he chanted, "The light of the demon god, shine on the 7 stars. Remove the light, and take its magic. The flower of the blood demon, bloom brightly, and the magic of the stars quickly absorb it." As soon as he finished speaking, the 7 small black flowers on the 7-star blood orchid suddenly trembled violently, and the thick smell of blood gradually spread around. After a long time, a majestic and unknown aura suddenly descended from the sky, and the entire valley gave people a very oppressive feeling in an instant. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the water, suddenly had a violent and uneasy mood. The light in the valley seemed to be a lot darker in an instant. Looking at the top of the 7 stone basins, there was a gray mist hovering 1 foot above them. It was getting thicker and darker. The 7 black snakes on the stone basins propped up their bodies and stuck their heads into the gray mist to greedily suck. Everything seemed so strange. Yu Qianqiu was still observing slowly at first. After waiting for an hour, Yan Zhuoxing, who was sitting cross-legged, didn't move. He just quietly watched the 7 black snakes suck the gray mist with a smile. Oh! Yu Qianqiu's pupils suddenly shrank. He found that the 7 black snakes seemed to be slightly bigger than before. He immediately recalled the scene of Yan Zhuoxing's body emitting black mist and condensing into a snake. The doubts in his mind were immediately dispelled, and his thoughts immediately became clear. The snake was originally condensed from the black mist released from Yan Zhuoxing's body. Now the snake was absorbing the gray mist summoned by the evil method to strengthen itself. In other words, Yan Zhuoxing would also become stronger after absorbing the snake back into his body. This might be the secret of Yan Zhuoxing's rapid cultivation increase. After understanding it, Yu Qianqiu immediately regretted it. He had sacrificed the lives of the 7 girls in vain. How could he sit back and watch Yan Zhuoxing grow stronger? Voila! Countless black flying swords suddenly rose from the stream and shot out like a torrential downpour. This sudden movement startled the few people present. Yan Zhuoxing even looked back in shock. He was a little dumbfounded to see so many flying swords suddenly emerging. At such a close distance, it was too late to escape. He quickly clapped his palms, and the 7 black snakes that sucked the gray mist quickly flew up and circled in front of him. They were like shields that bounced off the flying swords that were attacking Yan Zhuoxing. Bang bang bang. There was a dense explosion sound on the beach. Although the flying snakes helped Yan Zhuoxing to dodge the attack, the 7-star blood orchids in the 7 stone basins suffered a disaster. Not to mention the blood orchids, even the stone basins were shattered into pieces. My blood demon flower. Yan Zhuoxing hugged his head and let out a shrill scream. He had never been so sad in his life. These 7 basins of blood orchids were the hope of his struggle. They were destroyed just like that. It was equivalent to destroying his hope. It was more painful than taking his life. It was simply heartbreaking. "You dog, I can't even kill you like this." There was a curse in the stream. 2 bright small knives appeared in the hands of Xen Laosan and his brothers in an instant. It was similar to a guillotine used to cut herbs. 8 streams of light whizzed toward the place where Yu Qianqiu was hiding without hesitation. A figure immediately popped out from behind the stone in the stream, and at the same time, a group of dense black shadows exploded. Xiu xiu, sounds were like rain, and the 8 streams of light that shot over were directly smashed into pieces. The 4 brothers didn't hesitate to rush over and attack the figure that popped up in the air. With their cultivation at the end of the tribulation stage, they arrived in an instant. The figure opened his arms and shouted, "Absorbing Star's great technique." The others didn't know what the Absorbing Star's great technique was, but Xen Laosan could be said to be engraved in his heart. He didn't have time to say anything and could only hurriedly shout, "Run!" He had already teleported back quickly. Maybe he was still worried, so he jumped into the stream to escape. However, the other 3 brothers were not so lucky. They had already entered the range of Yu Qianqiu's power. Before they could react, 3 clouds of white mist exploded in the air and rushed into Yu Qianqiu's sleeve. The 3 withered corpses fell to the ground with a thud. Yu Qianqiu landed firmly on the ground. The black flying swords that he had released earlier flew back from all directions, forming a dense defensive formation around him. Yu Qianqiu stared at Yan Zhuoxing, who was holding his head for a long time, and snorted coldly, "Brother Yan, nice to meet you. It hasn't been long since we parted. I didn't expect to meet you here again." Xen Laosan's head popped out of the water. He stared at the 3 withered corpses on the ground and cried in pain, "Fifth brother. Sixth brother. Seventh brother." Although he was controlled by Yan Zhuoxing and was loyal to him, he still had a normal mind. As long as it wasn't Yan Zhuoxing's order, he could still distinguish between love and hate. He knew the pain of losing his brother. However, although he was sad, he was subconsciously afraid of Yu Qianqiu and didn't dare to come over. Yan Zhuoxing slowly released his hand and raised his head. His eyes that were staring at Yu Qianqiu instantly turned red. He roared angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, it's you." Yu Qianqiu stared at the 7 black flying snakes that were quickly circling and flying to protect Yan Zhuoxing. He squinted his eyes and said, "The demonic technique that you cultivate is really something. You can actually block my flying swords. Let's try again." Hundreds of black lights shot out like a torrential rain. Chapter 694. The 7 flying snakes moved like the wind and turned into 7 phantoms. Their speed was unbelievably fast and they were extremely agile. They protected Yan Zhuoxing so that not even a drop of water could get through. Dang dang dang, after a series of explosions, Yan Zhuoxing didn't move at all and continued to stare at Yu Qianqiu with hatred. "Damn you!" Yu Qianqiu cursed in disbelief. His attack didn't have any effect and the flying sword immediately rolled back to his side to protect him. The 7 flying snakes slowed down as well. They shook their heads and wagged their tails as they wriggled in the air. They looked at Yu Qianqiu with ferocious expressions and their eyes shone with a frightening red light. To be honest, Yu Qianqiu had always been very confident in his black fire flying sword. It was invincible and it had long become his trump card. Until now, most of the experts who had died in his hands had died under the black fire flying sword. He didn't expect to meet his nemesis today, 7 treasures. Yu Qianqiu's eyes revealed a look of envy and he wanted to take them for himself. The flying sword was dead but the 7 flying snakes were alive. Regardless of speed or agility, the flying sword couldn't compare to them. What was rare was that they were very sturdy. Even the sharpness of the black fire flying sword couldn't hurt them at all. Looking at the scene of them growing stronger by devouring them, it seemed like they could even level up and evolve. Damn. However, Yu Qianqiu also knew that he could only envy Yan Zhuoxing. These 7 flying snakes weren't real animals that could be tamed. They were formed by Yan Zhuoxing's demonic technique. "Yu Qianqiu, you deserve to die 1,000 times." Yan Zhuoxing gritted his teeth and spat out word by word. The sound of his bones cracking could be heard. "Deserving of 10,000 deaths?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes fell on the pools of blood on the ground. Even the girl who was still in a coma was smashed into pieces by his flying sword. His heart slightly tightened and his expression turned cold. He stared at Yan Zhuoxing and said in a deep voice, "Last time we didn't decide the winner but you ran away with your tail between your legs. This time don't run away if you have the guts. Let's see who will die first." "Do you really think that I'm afraid of you and will run away?" Yan Zhuoxing sneered with a face full of resentment. "I'm only interested in the hero behind you and want to subdue him for my own use. That's why I didn't kill you. I didn't expect you to be so arrogant that even my demonic eyes couldn't control you. Now you've even destroyed 7 of my blood demon flowers. Now that you know my secret, how can I let you leave alive?" Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank. He didn't expect Yan Zhuoxing to know that he was related to Hero. But thinking about it, it made sense. Back in the 100 Flowers Valley, he had used Hero to frame the father and son. Others might not know but the person involved must know. It wasn't strange for him to guess that Hero was related to him. Don't brag too early. It's still uncertain who won't leave alive. However, I definitely won't die. Do you believe me? Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly. He had Utopia as his final trump card. Even if he couldn't defeat Yan Zhuoxing, he was confident that he could escape. Therefore he believed that he wouldn't die. Yan Zhuoxing sneered in disdain. "Do you really think that you're the #1 expert below the soul formation stage? You'll naturally believe me after I beat you up." Yu Qianqiu smiled sinisterly. Suddenly he changed the topic and sighed. "On account of us being old friends, I'll tell you a piece of unfortunate news. Your father Yen Bugue really can't come back anymore. Because of your sins he was killed on the everlasting island. What a terrible death. Not only was he dismembered into pieces, he was even thrown into the sea to feed the fishes. Brother Yen, you have to hold on. Nonsense. Yen Juexing roared fiercely. A faint murderous aura began to float out from his body. However, looking at his dazed expression, he seemed to have more or less believed it. Thinking about it, he was being hunted by various countries. How could his father, who was with them, have a good ending? Now's the time. Yu Qianqiu raised his brows. Hundreds of flying swords shot out while Yen Juexing was dazed. However, the 7 flying snakes that were protecting Yen Juexing seemed to have a mind of their own. Without Yen Juexing's control, they would automatically protect their master. It danced rapidly and bounced off the incoming flying swords with clanging sounds. Yen Juexing came back to his senses and said indifferently, "Is that all you've got? Burn your mother." Yu Qianqiu cursed. The flying swords that he shot out exploded. The surging black flames instantly engulfed Yen Juexing and the 7 flying snakes. However, there was no response from the inside. Yu Qianqiu's expression changed. Thinking back to the scene at the saber drawing assembly, he cursed in his heart. This guy really isn't afraid of the black flames. Sure enough, Yen Juexing's disdainful snort came from the black flames. So that's how it is. It's the same as the broadsword, condensed from fire. It can be considered a mystical technique. It might work against others, but it's useless against me. In the surging black flames, a figure slowly walked out. There were 7 pairs of red lights circling around him. Yen Juexing calmly walked out of the flames. Coupled with the indifferent expression on his face, he looked like a demon that walked out of hell. Yen Juexing stood at the edge of the black flames. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and snorted. He slowly opened his arms and took a deep breath. The surging flames quickly rolled over and entered his nostrils and mouth like a whale sucking in water. The most terrifying thing was that his face was filled with a comfortable expression. The 7 flying snakes around him were also greedily sucking the black flames. The netherworld ghost flame actually became their tonic? Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He couldn't let them take advantage of him. He stretched out his palm and the surging sea of flames was quickly retracted into his sleeve. He could clearly feel that it had lessened a lot. Insignificant skill. Yen Juexing snorted in disdain and said indifferently, "Kill him." The 7 flying snakes shot out without hesitation. Yu Qianqiu naturally wouldn't just sit and wait for death. The flying swords around him immediately danced like a group of demons as they desperately blocked the 7 flying snakes. A series of clanging sounds rang out. The flying snakes weren't afraid of the flying swords that were burning with black flames at all. They shook their heads and wagged their tails as they charged forward with malevolent expressions. Their auras were ferocious and exceptionally valiant. The black flames' flying swords couldn't stop them. It was like scratching an itch on their bodies. It could only slow down their speed. Fuck. This is really troublesome. Yu Qianqiu suddenly had a feeling that he had nowhere to use his strength. These strange flying snakes couldn't be destroyed no matter how he slashed at them. They had a body full of skills, but he couldn't do anything to them. If he couldn't even deal with Yen Juexing's snakes, what was the point of fighting him? If he was forced to run away by a few snakes, then he would lose a lot of face. Just as he was thinking of a way to deal with them, the 7 flying snakes that were entangled by the flying swords suddenly sped up. They were like arrows that were released from a bow as they quickly launched a surprise attack. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and quickly dodged. Suddenly he felt a tight grip on his wrist. There was a slippery feeling as if he was being strangled by a strong force. He couldn't dodge nimbly anymore. He quickly glanced around and was instantly shocked. He saw a flying snake had already wrapped around one of his arms. It opened its bloody mouth and was about to bite his hand. Right at this moment, his limbs tightened and a huge pressure came from his waist and neck at the same time, almost suffocating him. Yu Qianqiu, today is the day you die. Yen Juexing's cold laughter echoed in the valley. Just at this moment, the valley suddenly shone with a dazzling green light. The entire valley was dyed in a bright green color. Hiss, hiss. A few shrill hisses echoed in the valley. At the critical moment, Yu Qianqiu, who was about to be bitten by the snakes, suddenly burst out with a ferocious green flame. The 7 flying snakes wrapped around Yu Qianqiu's body immediately emitted intense white smoke. They were shrinking at a visible speed. The flying snakes shook their heads and hissed in pain. They stopped entangling Yu Qianqiu and quickly retreated. In the blink of an eye, they were out of the sea of green flames. They hid beside Yen Juexing. Their bodies were much weaker. They trembled and looked at the ball of green flames in fear. Someone in the azure flame let out a strange ha sound. Yu Qianqiu, who was hiding in the azure flame, looked at himself in surprise. It seemed that even he didn't dare to believe what he was seeing. He had released the green flames out of instinct to protect himself. He had already made preparations to return to Utopia, but he didn't expect the green flames to have such a miraculous effect. Yu Qianqiu originally thought that even the powerful black fire couldn't deal with the snakes and that he was already at his wit's end. Who knew that the green flames, which were much weaker than black fire, could restrain them? Indeed, everything has a nemesis. How strange. Yu Qianqiu, who was in the green flames, immediately burst out with a strange cackle. He looked no different from a devil or monster, and his laughter was abnormally insolent. The surrounding black flying swords all disappeared into the green flame with a whooshing sound. Then a large number of green flying swords appeared and danced around the floating green flame. It was a breathtaking sight. Yan Zhuixing looked at the 7 flying snakes in astonishment and revealed a pained expression. Yu Qianqiu's fire made his heart feel like it was being cut by a knife. The flying snakes were connected to his cultivation. If the flying snakes were damaged, it was equivalent to his cultivation being damaged. How could he not feel pained? Yan Zhuixing, hand over your life. Yu Qianqiu shouted wildly. Now that he had the upper hand, he didn't plan to let Yan Zhuixing off even though he was just about to escape. He waved his arms and a sky full of green swords rained down. It was as if they wanted to turn the ground into a sieve. The 7 injured flying snakes rushed out to block and protect their master. However, their nemesis was their nemesis. The green flames flying swords weren't as sharp as the black fire flying swords, but they were extremely sharp against them. There was almost no sound. With a whooshing sound, the 7 flying snakes were immediately cut into pieces, like eels being chopped up on a chopping board to be cooked. Yan Zhuixing was alarmed. He clapped his hands and his body suddenly split into 3 like smoke, dodging the gaps of the green sword rain gently. 3 shadows that were as light as smoke swiftly devoured the snake fragments that were scattered in the air. Immediately after, they spun thousands of times in the rain of green swords, broke free from the net of swords and charged straight at Yu Qianqiu. Chapter 695. Yu Qianqiu could not help but gasp. With such a dense rain of swords, even an expert at the end of the tribulation stage would lack the space to teleport. This fellow's body that had split into 3 was actually as soft as a flowing cloud. It could be long or short, flat or wide, and it could even twist like a fried dough twist, slipping through the narrow gaps of the net of swords. He had always thought that this was an illusion technique, but looking at the situation, it seemed that the 3 shadows were the real body. As expected of a demonic technique, it was really strange. Without much time to think, the green flames surged to protect his body. The flying swords that were shot out quickly turned around and shot back with Yu Qianqiu as the center. Yan Zhuixing originally wanted to forcefully break through the sea of green flames and take Yu Qianqiu's life. But when he got close, he immediately realized that the temperature of the flames was frighteningly high. Actually, the high temperature was secondary. He could use the domineering demonic technique to force his way through. But the scary thing was that when he got close to the green flames, the demonic aura in his body actually showed signs of not flowing smoothly. The speed of his movements and attacks slowed down a lot. Thinking of the scene where the 7 spiritual snakes were easily cut apart, Yan Zhuixing was shocked. The demonic technique that he was so proud of was actually restrained by the green flames. The closer he got, the slower the demonic aura in his body circulated. His speed slowed down, but the flying swords behind him sped up and shot back. The flying swords were shot out in a spread pattern, and they flashed back through the gaps. Now that they were shot back, it was conceivable that the gap in the middle was much narrower than when they were shot out. In addition, the speed had slowed down. Yan Zhuixing was almost scared out of his wits. Even if the spiritual snakes were cut apart, as long as the body was still there, he could reform it. But if his body of flesh and blood was cut into pieces, he would lose his life. In front of him was Yu Qianqiu's sinister smile. Even if he was furious and wanted to tear him into pieces, it was not as important as saving his own life. The faces of the 3 phantoms were almost indistinguishable. They quickly broke away from the sea of fire that was pressing towards them. Like drifting clouds and smoke, they made hundreds and thousands of turns and narrowly passed through the green sword net. Yu Qianqiu was amazed. This demonic technique was really too magical. It would be great if he had the chance to practice it. However, as soon as he recalled the tragic deaths of those girls, he immediately dispelled that thought. He didn't think that he was a good person, but as a man, no matter if he was despicable or shameless, good or bad, he had to have something in his heart that could support the heavens and the earth. There were things that he could do and things that he couldn't. Only then would he be worthy of being a man. As soon as the 3 wisps of green smoke left the sword net, they immediately combined into one on the way back. Yan Zhuoxing's original body immediately appeared in the air. However, his current image was a little too horrible to look at. There was no trace of her hair crown, and nearly half of her long hair had been shaved off. Her clothes were tattered, and it was unknown how many cuts there were on her body. Fortunately, she was not injured. It could be seen how much of a risk he had taken to escape just now. He had practically brushed past the edge of death or serious injury to escape. This was all thanks to the miraculous demonic arts he had cultivated. The entire valley was dyed with green light. The stream reflected the green light, like a green jade belt. Third brother Xin, who had his head above the water, was dumbfounded as he watched the two fight. This was a fight that he had never seen before. Both of them were using strange techniques. It couldn't be said that the winner had been decided yet, and he didn't know who would win and who would lose in the end. Yan Zhuoxing, whose clothes were tattered and hair was disheveled, gnashed his teeth as he checked his body. He shouted angrily, "You Qianqiu, I won't forgive you. Use your brain before you speak. Look at yourself now. You're like a stray dog. Who is the one who won't forgive who?" Yu Qianqiu, who was in the sea of fire, suddenly said, "I almost forgot. You were originally a stray dog. In order to escape, you didn't even care about your mother and sister. Now you don't even care about your old father. I think you'll have to hide for the rest of your life. You'll be a dog that can't return to its home for the rest of your life." These words made Yan Zhuoxing tremble in anger. His eyes instantly turned blood red. His body faintly emitted a black light and a majestic killing intent rose. His chest swelled up and he suddenly spat a mouthful of blood on his palms. He clapped his palms and rubbed them together. In an instant, layers of red blood spread out from his palms. The faint red light enveloped a radius of nearly 10 meters. It was like a treasure light covering his entire body. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank. He immediately became vigilant and his flying swords formed a formation to protect himself. Yan Zhuoxing's strange techniques were simply unimaginable. He couldn't help but be careful. Yan Zhuoxing clapped his palms again and chanted in a deep voice, "Blood Demon Armor." The red light within a radius of 10 meters quickly shrank. In the blink of an eye, it was like a red armor covered his body. In addition to that pair of red eyes, he looked like a monster. It was terrifying to look at. The first to strike is the strongest and the second to strike will suffer. This was the truth that Yu Qianqiu believed in when he was killing people. He waved his hands and hundreds of flying swords shot out crazily. "Shoot the mother asterisk cur first." Demonic light glimpse. His voice echoed in the valley. Yan Zhuoxing's body suddenly disappeared from the spot. Xiao. An unbelievably fast red light directly collided with the rain of green swords shot out by Yu Qianqiu. The speed of the flying swords paled in comparison to the speed of the red light. It was like child's play. The speed was almost the same as teleportation. Ping ping. Rapid sounds of collision could be heard. A red light forcefully charged into the rain of swords, causing the green flying swords to be in a mess. In the blink of an eye, it broke through the rain of swords and arrived in front of Yu Qianqiu. The red light continued to charge into the sea of green flames. A fist was violently punched out. "Little devil fist." Yu Qianqiu vaguely heard these 3 words. The speed was too fast. The 3 words "little devil fist" and "demonic light glimpse" were almost superimposed together. The scene of Yan Zhuoxing smashing the big black saber in cornucopia flashed in Yu Qianqiu's mind. He seemed to have heard the 3 words "little devil fist" at that time. If the big black saber couldn't do it, then he would use the big green saber. Although it was slow, it was actually fast. At the same time when Yan Zhuoxing forcefully broke through the rain of swords, Yu Qianqiu struggled to raise a huge shining green saber. This saber was frighteningly huge. It was 4 to 5 meters long and more than 1 meter wide. High. The green light broke through the air and formed a green light screen, illuminating the entire valley. Yu Qianqiu held the saber with both hands and used all his strength to crazily slash at the red light. Bang! A loud sound reverberated in the valley. Countless scattered green light fragments were more dazzling than the stars in the sky, and shot in all directions like meteors. The tinkling sound of falling to the ground could be heard everywhere on the beach. The Daqing saber was instantly shattered by a powerful force. Pfft! Yu Qianqiu looked up and spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was shaken and flew backward rapidly. He felt that his internal organs had shifted and his stomach was in turmoil. His eyes were seeing stars and his ears were ringing non-stop. He didn't even know that he had been shaken and flew backward. He only felt dizzy as if the world was spinning, as if he was in a fog. The red figure that was rushing over also stopped for a moment. The red armor instantly collapsed. Yan Zhuoxing, whose hair was disheveled, let out a muffled groan. His other hand was holding onto the fist that he had just punched out furiously. Bright red blood was dripping between his fingers. He pulled out the fist from his palm in disbelief. In fact, it could no longer be considered a complete fist, because half of the fist had already been cut off to God knows where, and the broken bones inside were clearly visible. The blood demon's armor and the magic ray glimpse were demonic techniques that he had cultivated recently. He didn't expect that they would be broken by Yu Qianqiu's saber the first time he used them. With Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, it was impossible for him to break these two sets of demonic techniques. The key to the problem was undoubtedly that big green saber. He was now 100% sure that Yu Qianqiu's green fire could restrain his demonic technique. He hated the fact that his demonic technique was still far from completion. Otherwise, how could a small green fire restrain it? However, that big green saber was also shattered by his own small demonic fist. Yan Zhuoxing's gaze retracted from the green fragments around him and coldly stared at Yu Qianqiu. The injury on his hand didn't seem to have much effect on him. Yu Qianqiu, who was covered in green flames, fell onto a rock on the stream with a "pa" sound. It was the rock that he had been hiding on earlier. The green fire instantly retracted back into his body. Without anyone controlling the flying swords, they all fell to the ground one after another. Yu Qianqiu struggled a few times but he couldn't stand up. So he simply stopped moving. He sat on the rock paralyzed to recover his energy. His arms were behind his back, supporting his upper body. Blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth, but he still laughed and said, "Brother Yin, how was the taste of this saber? Brother, did I go too hard?" Third Xan, who was hiding in the river, jumped out of the water with a "hua" sound. He could also see that Yu Qianqiu was injured, so he wanted to take this opportunity to kill him. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and sneered, "Third Xan, if you're not afraid of death, come and try. No matter how badly injured I am, taking care of you is still a piece of cake. You back off. This is between me and him." Yan Zhuoxing waved his broken palm and stopped Third Xan. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a deep voice, "I want to take his dog life with my own hands. Today he won't be able to escape." "What a joke. You're just a stray dog?" Yu Qianqiu sneered, "You're missing one part of your fist. Let's see how you're going to use the small demonic fist. There are many ways to kill you. Moreover, everyone has two fists." Yan Zhuoxing slowly raised his other fist and shot down from above. He shouted angrily, "Small demonic fist." An intense wind from his fist swept over. Yu Qianqiu sneered, and the stream behind him suddenly surged up violently. The stream was immediately cut off, and the exposed rocks below could be seen. The water from above came crashing down again. Two huge water dragons directly hit Yan Zhuoxing, who was pouncing over. A lump of ice appeared in the air in an instant, wrapping Yan Zhuoxing inside and falling straight down. Yu Qianqiu quickly bounced off the stone and shot towards the lump of ice. But before the lump of ice landed on the ground, cracks appeared on it. With a bang, it exploded into countless pieces of ice and a figure shot out. Actually, Yu Qianqiu didn't expect the ice to trap him. This kind of ice couldn't even trap a core formation stage cultivator, let alone Yan Zhuoxing. But what he wanted was this buffer time. He slapped Yan Zhuoxing in the air and shouted angrily, "Absorbing Star's great technique." Chapter 696. When these four words rang in the valley, Third Xan had the urge to run away. He looked at Yan Zhuoxing, who broke out of the ice in horror, looking forward to his master's amazing skill to show its power again. However, Yan Zhuoxing disappointed him in the end. He also saw the fierceness of the Absorbing Star's great skill again. Yu Qianqiu attacked with his palm. A cloud of white fog exploded from Yan Zhuoxing's body, and the white fog drilled into the former's palm like a flowing cloud. Yan Zhuoxing lost his momentum in an instant. His body instantly became thinner and he slowly floated down, smashing into the ground with a thud. The valley instantly became quiet as if everything was over. Finally, he got rid of this big trouble. Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief. He floated in the air and stared at the pile of bones below him, laughing. He clicked his tongue proudly and said, "My absorbing star's great skill is nothing special when I don't use it. Once I use it, it will never fail." Dongfang Bubi was considered powerful in the past. Once he used the absorbing star's great skill, he still lost. Amazing. Third Xian was completely dumbfounded. Even when he was awake, he did not know who Dongfang Bubi was. There was only one sentence that kept reverberating in his mind. "Master is dead." Yu Qianqiu, who was laughing and boasting himself, suddenly exclaimed in surprise. He seemed to have found something wrong. Logically speaking, a person who was hit by his absorbing star's great skill and had all the water in his body sucked dry should be smashed to pieces when he fell from a height of more than 10 meters. However, Yan Juexing's dried corpse, although it was already like a skeleton, was still standing there. It looked a little strange. At this moment, a ball of black light suddenly appeared from Yan Juexing's body. It spread out and quickly protected his corpse. As the ball of black light emerged, Yu Qianqiu suddenly sensed a terrifying aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. It was desolate, ancient, and the entire valley seemed to have instantly traversed through space and returned to the distant past. The unknown aura was so terrifying that it made people suffocate. It was so thick and powerful that it was indescribable. He was clearly looking down from the sky, but it was as if he was looking up at a towering, majestic mountain. It made his heart surge with emotions, but also filled him with endless trembling. The instant the black light enveloped Yan Juexing's corpse, the surrounding ice cubes all clanked and bounced on the ground. Yu Qianqiu and third brother Xan looked around in fear. Suddenly, with a so-so sound, with Yan Juexing as the center, the surrounding crushed ice quickly gathered and wrapped around Yan Juexing in an instant. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank. He saw an unbelievable scene. The corpse wrapped in ice was rapidly expanding, as if it was absorbing the water from the ice to replenish its body. Damn it. This was too monstrous. Could it be that this dog couldn't be killed? In a panic, Yu Qianqiu clenched his teeth, and a trace of ruthlessness flashed across his face. He spread his arms, and all the green fragments and flying swords in the valley returned to his body. He clasped his hands together, and the green light once again illuminated the valley. A huge green saber that was 4 to 5 meters long appeared in his hand. "Yan Juexing, I don't care if you're a human, a demon, or a demon. I don't believe in evil. I'll chop you into minced meat. Let's see how you're going to survive." Yu Qianqiu shouted. With a whoo sound, a green light flashed across the sky, and a crazy saber shadow slashed towards the figure in the ice cubes. Bang! The ice cubes suddenly exploded, and a figure emerged from the ice cubes. Immediately he let out a shrill scream. Yan Juexing did resurrect, but unfortunately he ran into Yu Qianqiu, who believed in eliminating the root of the problem. The moment he broke out of the ice cubes, he ran into the saber. He didn't even have time to dodge. His body quickly dodged, but he was still hit by the saber. Blood splattered, and the saber directly cut down from his shoulder. His entire arm was separated from his body, and his arm was sent flying on the spot. When Yu Qianqiu became ruthless, he was definitely a ruthless character. There was no such thing as mercy. What he wanted was Yan Juexing's life. How could an arm satisfy his desire? He shouted with a ferocious face, "Give me your life." The saber followed Yan Juexing's dodging body and chased after him. Yan Juexing, who had already lost a lot of vitality, desperately waved a little devil fist with his other hand and smashed it on the broad saber. With a loud dang sound, the saber was immediately shaken off. However, it seemed that he had the will but not the strength. He, who had lost a lot of vitality, had no strength to shatter the great green saber. He could only shake it off. Taking advantage of this gap, he quickly dodged and drew an arc downwards. When he was close to the ground, he grabbed the arm that was separated from his body. Yu Qianqiu's arm shook, and he realized that the power of Yan Juexing's little devil fist was far from what he had imagined. He immediately understood that this kid was too heavily injured and didn't have much lethality. In other words, now was the best time to kill him. He must not miss this opportunity. The terrifyingly large great green saber quickly slashed again. Yan Juexing, who was pale, stepped on the ground and used the momentum to retreat. The great green saber brushed past him and he barely escaped this attack. Bang! The ground was slashed by the saber and the gravel flew everywhere. Yu Qianqiu missed his attack, so he pushed the saber and quickly chased after Yan Juexing. He stabbed wildly at Yan Juexing, who was flying backward. The scene of him slashing madly made people speechless. Yan Juexing, who was exhausted, was immediately scared out of his wits. His pale face became even paler. Yan Juexing, who was dancing on the blade, immediately understood that Yu Qianqiu was now full of vigor, and he didn't have the strength to fight with Yu Qianqiu in his current physical condition. If he continued to waste time, he would only die. He immediately shouted, "Third brother Xen, go to Lingfang Valley quickly and steal your master's 10 pots of blood orchids at all costs." "Hurry!" Third brother Xen immediately flew away without hesitation, and the direction was Lingfang Valley. 10 pots of blood orchids? Even if I give you 10,000 pots of blood orchids, you won't have the chance to use them again. Today I must chop you into minced meat and feed you to the dogs. I'll see how you can resurrect. Still want to run? Stop right there. Just give me a few slashes and I'll give you a quick death. Now you know that I'm the #1 master below the spirit-severing stage. Motherf asterisk her. Don't run. Yu Qianqiu kept scolding, and his hands didn't slow down either, slashing wildly. He wouldn't stop until he killed you. Yan Juexing, whose hair was disheveled and clothes were ragged, had a pale face. At this time there was a morbid flush on his face. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and almost spewed fire. Under such a crushing defeat, he still had to suffer insults while fleeing in a hurry. No one could stand it. As long as one had a little bit of courage, it would be strange if he didn't fight desperately. At this time, Yan Juexing almost lost his mind after being scolded by Yu Qianqiu. He really wanted to rush forward and fight. Even if he could bite Yu Qianqiu, he would be willing to die. However, a trace of reason told him that he couldn't be impulsive. If he was impulsive at this time, he might not even have the chance to take revenge. Yan Juexing, who was fleeing in a hurry, stared at the broken arm in his hand. A trace of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. He originally wanted to use demonic arts to reattach the broken arm, but now it seemed that saving his life was the top priority. Escape. Yan Juexing, who was in the saber light, suddenly grabbed the broken arm and squeezed it. With a bang, the entire broken arm instantly exploded into pieces. In an instant, a large amount of blood mist appeared, making it impossible to see anything clearly. Not to mention Yan Juexing's strange behavior, when Yu Qianqiu heard that escape, he immediately felt that something was wrong. The cyan saber shadow immediately danced wildly in the blood mist. He roared angrily, "Yan Juexing, don't run if you have the guts. Whoever runs is a beast." The expanding blood mist suddenly collapsed and shrank rapidly, forming a blood scab that fell to the ground. The valley was restored to its original state. Yu Qianqiu, who was dancing wildly with the saber, stopped and saw that the surroundings were empty. There was no trace of Yan Juexing. He didn't even know where Yan Juexing escaped from. There was no sound of anyone leaving at all. Yan Juexing seemed to have suddenly disappeared. He didn't know that if Yan Juexing still had the strength when he was in the cornucopia, he would probably have died in the hands of Yu Qianqiu. However, during this time, Yan Juexing, who had used the 7-star blood orchid to successfully break through to the middle stage of crossing calamity, practiced a few demonic arts that he could barely dabble in, and saved his life at the critical moment. However, there was a special reason why he was magically resurrected after being hit by Yu Qianqiu's absorbing star's great technique. Perhaps even Yan Juexing himself didn't know how he came back to life again. What he used to escape just now was the blood escape from the demonic book, which was one of the demonic arts that he had just practiced. Normally, it would be very difficult to cultivate until the end of the tribulation, but because of his current difficult situation, he forced himself to cultivate and almost suffered the backlash of the demonic art. During the process he endured unimaginable pain, but he stubbornly gritted his teeth and endured it. Practicing the blood escape was originally used to guard against masters in the soul formation stage, but who knew that he would be forced to use it for the first time by Yu Qianqiu? The use of this demonic art consumed a lot of devil aura, and it also used a lot of one's own blood essence as a primer. It was an escape method that was used as a last resort, and generally wouldn't be used easily. Demonic cultivators with high cultivation could use the blood escape to save their lives, and they could escape thousands of miles in an instant. The higher their cultivation, the farther they could escape, and it was very effective in saving their lives at the critical moment. However, with Yan Juexing's current cultivation and physical state, he couldn't escape far at all. The blood escape just now only escaped for about 10 miles. At this time, Yan Juexing was hiding in a desolate ravine, and even he didn't know where he was. His face was as yellow as gold paper, and his whole body was curled up on the ground. His whole body was trembling in pain, and beads of sweat the size of soybeans appeared on his forehead. He endured the pain and told himself that he must not faint. Once he fainted, The smell of blood on his body would definitely attract the ferocious beasts in the deep mountains. There was no lack of ferocious beasts in the deep mountains. If he didn't die in the hands of Yu Qianqiu, but died in the hands of beasts, it would be too unjust. He held his shoulder that had lost an arm with one hand, and tried to sit up to recover. He gritted his teeth a few times but he couldn't sit up. His body was too weak. In the end he bit his lips so hard that blood came out and the veins on his neck bulged. Ugh. He raised his head and let out a painful groan and finally sat up. After panting a few times, he sat cross-legged with difficulty, and quickly treated the wound on his shoulder. He stopped the blood flow, and slowly entered a state of recovery. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.